Welcome to the second day of the European Commission Conference, Upskilling and Reskilling in the Post-COVID Era, Fostering New Services and Job Creation. We're very pleased to have you back on board for the second day. And my name is Sturesson from Sweden, and I will be your host and moderator of today. I'm a strategy consultant for nations, cities, and private sector. We really hope that you enjoyed the conference yesterday. I would say amazing speakers with very T-shaped skills, very deep and very wide, together with great discussions around the table, digitally speaking, so to say. This gave us, I think, vision, passion, and a clear up and reskilling mission from now on to make ourselves, our organizations, our sector and industry more competitive through new skills. Let's take some minutes here in the beginning to be reminded of some facts from yesterday. First, I would say, this is so big. And I'm stopped here. It's unbelievable. So we need leaders that understands the real need for up and reskilling, how important it is, and the magnitude, but not least its impact on innovation, short and long term. Another comment, we need CSOs, Chief Skills Officers, on all levels in all organizations, government and companies from now on. And we need to look upon up and reskilling as a privileged thing for people to participate in this, giving strong incentives for lifelong employability and learning. And we need to understand that the ROI, return on investment, comes quickly, maybe quicker than we think. And Mr. Bob Moritz, Global Chairman PwC, said upskilled people with a robust T-shaped skills profile are being more innovative. So it pays off. And these people tend to be more flexible and open to change. Let me also say that we need disruptive perspectives of innovation and skills. The Stone Age did not disappear due to lack of stones. New knowledge created new materials and replaced the old, from stones to iron and copper. New skills was needed. Today, some of those stones are maybe analog office meetings or traditional fossil cars, and the new material is called digital conference and remote work, discussing new AI algorithms while driving a green electric car. So new skills are needed to replace old technology and old ways of thinking, working, and so on. So what do we learn from history today? That was one rhetoric question yesterday from Erwin Wladawski-Berger, a very thoughtful thing to think about. All things what we talk about here linked to skills requires some very specific thing. And I would say that's called leadership. So lead yourself, lead others. And Bianca Dragomir yesterday said, we are overmanaged but underled. Reflect upon that quote. It gives us a perspective of wisdom, I think. The word leadership comes from the age of the Nordic Vikings and the leading ship. So let's be peaceful leading ships and not as the Vikings at their time, with great skills and knowledge for the future. To be a leading ship is an important thing. And now we will do this today. We will continue with exciting sessions and top speakers and panelists from all over Europe and the rest of the world. We will start with European policy actions set in motion by the European Commission. So the first theme of today is AI, digital transformation of industry and skills, policy actions. And will you please welcome with me two directors from the European Commission who will share this first session. It's Lucilla Sioli, Director, European Commission, DG CNECT, and Valentina Superti, Director, European Commission, DG Grow. So, dear Lucilla, the floor, the screen is yours. Welcome to share.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to this event. I am very happy to be talking about the skills needs that we have in the digital world. Of course, as we all know, with the pandemic, the use of digital has accelerated, and all of us had to learn to work and study from home. And in any case, through the digital transformation, of course, many jobs get transformed, and many more people in all possible occupations will have to learn to use digital with different applications, of course. But today, I would like to talk to you about the skills needs we have in two main areas of digital, which everybody's talking about in these days. One is artificial intelligence, and the other one is semiconductors. And I have to say that the two approaches are a little bit different, and so I will use them as example of the fact that you may need to have different policy approaches to somehow different kind of technologies and environments. So artificial intelligence, as you all know, it's about data and algorithms being trained on data and delivering some predictions or decisions. And the importance of AI is the fact that AI can be applied in all possible sectors of the economy. You can find it in healthcare as well as you find it in financial services, or you find it in agriculture. And so we here, when we talk about AI, we really face a number of different challenges. First of all, and this is a general issue that we have in digital, is that we don't have enough talent, enough experts, in this case, enough data scientists. Secondly, is the fact that we don't have enough female being data scientists. And this is not just a problem of numbers. It is really a problem of the fact that the teams that develop artificial intelligence need to be diverse. They have to be diverse in terms of gender and in many other respects, because artificial intelligence is a system that can easily result in discrimination and bias. And normally, the possibility of diversified developing teams are useful because they very much limit the bias that can result in the design of the technology. So I would say maybe more than in any other technology, the participation of women and diversified teams are particularly useful in AI. Thirdly, we have to think of the use of artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence is used in factories, in manufacturing, and so we have to train workers in all these companies to use AI, but we also have to train white collars, people like doctors, lawyers. These are people who will be making great use of artificial intelligence. They're already using it now and don't necessarily have the skills to use it. And it's not about being able to train AI or program the training of an artificial intelligence system. This is about being able to work with the technology and being able to be aware of the impact it may have. The use that one can make of it, its degree of transparency and its degree of traceability. And we think that these are aspects that should actually be part of study courses that are taught at universities in these faculties. Sometimes people think AI skills are for experts who study informatics, engineering, and computing science, but in reality, some skills in terms of programming and understanding how a technology works, even if one doesn't have to program it, can be very useful in all the faculties. And so this kind of multidisciplinarity approach for digital is going to be very important. And then finally, we need to make sure that also the citizens are able to use AI, or at least are able to understand the implications of the use of AI. Nowadays, media talk about AI in very negative ways, with creating many different fears. But in reality, it should not be the case. In Finland, for example, they have developed a MOOC that can be used to train citizens to the use of AI. And I think it's very important that this happens in a larger scale. Now, if I move to the parallel track of microelectronics, here the difference is that in microelectronics, the main problem is the shortage of experts, of skilled experts. And so here the problem is not about the use of microelectronics, but very much about the development of microelectronics. And in the European Union, we are very much discussing the semiconductors policy because we are very dependent on production in other countries, non-European countries, and we want to strengthen our capabilities in developing and producing this technology in the European Union. But clearly, we don't have enough experts to do that. So here for us, the main possibility is, of course, to tap on the faculties of engineering and computing science, and these are going to be the people that have the right skills to carry out this job. But how can we increase the numbers of these people then working in the in companies in the sector? First of all, to attract more people to engineering, informatics, and this kind of studies, it is important to start teaching programming or computational thinking very early in schools. And so we have been proposing as the European Commission Code Week. This is a week where we really promote the use of coding and the development of coding in schools. We think that if you learn very early, students and young students are likely to be even more attracted by this kind of studies later in life. And secondly, to attract more people, in particular, to the area of semiconductors, which is probably an area that is not, this is not an area like AI everybody talks about and doesn't look particularly maybe attractive to young students. Well, one important instrument, in our opinion, is the use of internships. We have set up a program a few years ago called the Digital Opportunity Traineeship Scheme, exactly to foster this exchange between companies and universities, and have students have access to on-the-job learning and more internships before even the end of their studies, so that then at the end they would be acquainted with this kind of companies and would find their job interesting and would probably move to those companies. So we have now made that kind of program more important under Erasmus+, and I think that it is the instrument of internships is a very good weapon for attracting students to work in certain environments. And certainly that's what we will also do under the Pact for Skills, which is now supporting this particular area of work, and where we invite companies and organizations to make pledges and participate to promote even more the jobs and the skills that are needed in this particular environment. Now, if I go back to what the European Commission is doing for these different digital areas, and in particular for artificial intelligence, but also for cybersecurity and high-performance computing, we have set up a program. It's called Digital Europe Program. And in this program, we have set aside some budget exactly for reskilling and upskilling interested students and workers in these particular areas. We will also be using the digital innovation hubs, which are organizations that are going to help small, medium enterprises to uptake technologies, including artificial intelligence, to help small, medium enterprises understand what they need, and also retrain people in the small, medium enterprises that need to learn certain aspects of AI or data analytics or the data economy in general. So I think we have a number, being the European Commission, we have a number of programs in place, starting again with the Pact for Skills, but also thinking of other programs like the Digital Europe program and some calls in Horizon Europe, which is our research program, which will also be targeting skills development. And I think that all this is going to be extremely useful to be able to develop the skills of our experts that are so much in need and in scarcity, unfortunately, for the moment in the digital economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lucilla, for these real great insights. We now ask Valentina to share with us her insights on this topic. Please, Valentina, The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And indeed, thank you very much for the invitation to speak about skills. And, you know, I think skills is a fundamental element of the equation that we need to keep in mind as policymakers to foster recovery and transition of the industrial ecosystems. So I'm particularly glad to be here with you today for this reason. Now, we have seen that developments linked in particular to the pandemic, which we have experienced, have made the statement which was made incidentally by, at the time, President-elect Ursula von der Leyen, who said in 2019, the best investment in our future is investment in our people. So the pandemic has made this message even more relevant. What we are observing is that industry and industrial ecosystems change increasingly fast in a complex and interconnected manner. So they all face, all of them actually face the requirement to drive forward the green and digital transition. But at the same time, now they have to deliver on the recovery and the resilience. So it is a double challenge. And industrial ecosystems all depend on a workforce, so on people that are skilled and as good as possible at all ages and in all contexts. And at the same time, yet, what we know is that 70%, so it's a very high percentage, 70% of European enterprise say that they lack the skills and that this in turn hampers their investment. So around half, according to our information, of the workforce may require upskilling in the next 5 years. And this is clearly a particular challenge for the smaller, for the smallest, for the SMEs, which are at the same time, we know what we keep on saying, and it's reality, the backbone of our economy. So it's also to be, as a matter of context, I think it's important to remember that actually the main competence for skills lies at member states level. So it's not really a direct competence of the European Commission. However, I think it's fair to say that the Commission, the European Commission, assumes its responsibility to foster skill development whenever possible. For example, skills are at the heart of the European social rights, of the single market actions, and also of our industrial strategy thinking, let's say. Just to highlight, in addition to what Lucilla mentioned, 3 initiatives from the European Commission, which I think are relevant. The first is the Pact for Skills. And it was launched at the end of last year to help shape new types of jobs that do not yet exist. The second one is the Digital Compass. This is DG Connect responsibility. And in this context, the Commission set important targets on digital skills. So those targets are now there. And thirdly, the Industrial Strategy Update, which was adopted on 5th of May this year, And in this policy document, we emphasized that a skilled workforce is key in supporting competitiveness of European industry and quality job creation. The support to upskilling again and reskilling for everyone is essential for Europe to make a success of our green and digital transition, and by the way, to ensure that hopefully no one is left behind. And digital skills, I would say in particular, are a pressing challenge. Now, let me give you a couple of examples, concrete examples, hopefully, of what we are doing in a couple of industrial ecosystems. You may know that we have identified 14 different industrial ecosystems in Europe. I have the honor and the pleasure to be particularly responsible for tourism, for example, and the textiles industries. Both of these two industrial ecosystems have been very hard hit by the crisis. And according to our analysis, both of these industrial ecosystems can substantially benefit from upskilling and reskilling meant to precisely address the transition. And for both of these ecosystems, we'll be launching a large-scale skills partnership by the end of the year, in order to identify at the end of the day specific actions in terms of upskilling and reskilling. Now, digital skills, just a specific mention of beyond industrial ecosystems, digital skills are actually a specific, however, a transversal challenge for all industrial ecosystems. And the digital skills which are necessary for the future are very broad, because according to us, these include, for example, data management, conducting online businesses, using augmented reality technologies, artificial intelligence, which was mentioned, blockchain technology. So there is really a lot to do. We have launched last January 3 blueprints for sectoral cooperations of skills in blockchain, cybersecurity, software services. But this is, of course, commendable, but we need to go further. So we really need, and this is what we are busy right now, we really need to go through all industrial ecosystems, the 14, and to really understand what are the true needs of the European economy and of each one of these industrial ecosystems. We will have to be particularly mindful of the small companies, which typically have less resources, have encounter more difficulties to face challenges. So we have that in mind, and we see that a thorough understanding of digital trends and innovation is actually a prerequisite for us, for policymakers, to make informed decisions, and this is, of course, including skills. So we will, in the next weeks and months, reach out to the industrial ecosystems to better understand how we can turn innovation and new business models into, let's say, state-of-the-art skills development. So I am hopeful and confident, actually, that the discussions today will help us in this direction. And any and all views are, especially if informed views, are always welcome. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Valentina, for this very informative and updating presentation. Now we move to the next session, and the topic is platforms, markets, and innovation, business responses and strategies. And we will first listen to Annabelle Goya, who is a shared professor in digital economy and director of the Center of Digital Economy, CODE. She's a world-class academic pioneer in platform strategy, and she's a thought leader on digital platforms and platform-based innovation ecosystems, I would say. Annabelle will be followed by Mark Klein, who is CDO, Chief Digital Officer, at the Ergo Insurance Group in Germany. Mark is a high-level practitioner who has really developed the Ergo company strategy on how to best deal with AI, robotics, and innovation in the area of voice in an insurance company. He will speak to us about how strategy is being implemented and how it leads to new types of services and what it means to the Ergo workforce, but also how the workforce are upskilled to become fit for the future and learn the ability to learn throughout their working life. But Annabelle is first, so please, Annabelle, the floor is yours. Go live with us.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well? Good. So I'm delighted to be here today, and thank you for the conference organizers, Skills4Industry, to include me. My presentation aims to explain clearly how platforms operate, how they create value and how they capture value, and to propose some suggestions for what are the implications for work and for skills to allow Europe to take advantage of the digital economy. I have been studying the topic of platforms and ecosystem for over 20 years, and the word platform is used in many different contexts, but sometimes there is a lack of clarity about what it means. Platforms come in different sizes and different forms. An emblematic example will be the Apple iPhone, which, as you all know, has a number of apps that are accessible via the iPhone that have been developed by innovators that reside in what we call the Apple ecosystem. These app developers are not Apple employees, nor are they traditional suppliers to Apple in the way that you would say the companies that develop what's inside the Apple phone, for example, a battery or a microchip, a company like Foxconn, who would build those iPhones, that would be a supplier to iPhone in a traditional sense, in that they would develop components of the iPhone and then sell them to iPhone, and iPhone would integrate them into its machine and then resell the machine. The nature of the economic relationship between the app developers and Apple is different in that these app developers do not sell their goods or service to Apple and Apple would resell them. They create software apps that are compatible with Apple, that have been developed in a way that is easy to do by developers of these apps because they are using the connectors or application programming interfaces that Apple puts at their disposal. And they are enriching what the Apple phone can connect to without, however, becoming suppliers to Apple. So we see that the platform firm here plays a role of an orchestrator of innovation, which is innovation developed by external parties, third parties. And the nature of that relationship is of a different nature than traditional buyer-supplier relationship. And we see examples of that kind of structure of industry a lot in digital markets. So we see that, of course, obviously, I just gave the Apple example, but we see that with Google, with LinkedIn, with Facebook, with Twitter, TripAdvisor, Waze. What do they technologies have in common? Let's take the humble and very physical Lego block. The Lego block is a module, and it has a lot of commonalities in terms of its design, the way it's designed with platforms. You see that Lego blocks exist in a variety of colors, and some of them are longer or thicker than others, but one aspect of their design is always the same. What is always the same across all Lego blocks? Well, it is the elevated cylinders, those little sticky outy circles that facilitate one Lego block to be put and assembled on top of another Lego block. So you can think of them as interfaces, and you can think of Lego blocks as modules that can be assembled in ways that can be extremely creative. Think about, for example, what is this sculpture doing here? You see a sculpture assembling a very innovative system made out of all these Lego blocks. It's creating something that nobody had ever invented before. Here it's a city springing out of a hand. And the reason that he was able to do so is because you can assemble and mix and match the modules that are the Lego blocks, thanks to those standardized interfaces, in ways that generate a lot of creativity. So think of the sticky outy little cylinders of Lego blocks as the physical embodiment of what a software interface is. A software interface facilitates connection, facilitates assembly between different modules, except that in the world of digital platforms, what you have are different companies making different modules, and the platform owner is the company that makes a central core module that all the other little modules depend on and connect to. The nature of the interface between the platform owner and the complementor is different than a physical interface. What it is, it's a conduit where data, think about a freeway or a road, where data can go both ways, from the complementary innovator to the platform, and from the platform to the complementary innovator. It can go both ways between the platform and the user and the platform. So what we have when we engage with digital platform is a two-way road where data goes in and data goes out, with the platform at the core of an ecosystem. Think about the nucleus of an atom surrounded by these different electrons. So now that we understand better how platforms are structured, let's look at the consequences in terms of how they create value. Platforms, and in particular digital platforms, they lead to new way of creating value because you can assemble and bring together things that are complementary to each other. So digital services generate specific kind of complementarities between supply and demand, or between production and consumption. Let's give you an example. When you are driving on a road and you are using a for example, Waze or Google Maps or Apple Maps, you're driving there and you see on the map where you are, okay? And so you're consuming some services which is provided to you using some kind of digital technology. But you're not just a passive consumer. It's not like eating a banana, and you are feeding back data. You don't just absorb data, you are feeding back data into that system. You generate data as to, in this situation, your location, your speed, your direction of travel. That data can then be captured by the platform company, which can utilize this data to do lots of useful things with it. One, it can just reuse that as input to update, in this particular example, its map, and realize that your average speed on that road is lower than what it normally is at that time. And therefore, you will see automatically the map on your phone going from the road being in color green to maybe color orange or maybe color red, indicating to you that there is traffic there. And maybe that data can be used to feed into a machine learning algorithm that is going to actually suggest a bypass and a different road. So platform companies can utilize the data that is being generated in the context of data being used and being consumed. And that data can also be used to do other things, not just reinforce the performance of this particular product or service you're using. It can be used as input for enriching your profile, because platform companies keep a profile of users. It can also facilitate the job of companies to do users discrimination between users that have different willingness to pay or different ages, or on the basis of information they reveal about themselves. And it can, as I said, be used to feed into the machine learning algorithms. This can also be used by companies, platform companies, to enter new sector. So data is very potent. It's got the characteristic of becoming is not a rival good, which means that you can use it and I can use it and the data still exists. It's not, again, like eating something that once I eat it is not there available for consumption. So it doesn't get depleted as it gets consumed. And you have that feedback loop between production and consumption. So I make a difference now focusing on platforms between two different kinds of platforms. The first one is transaction platforms. These are the online marketplaces that we know. These are the companies that facilitate exchange between different sides. It could be, Uber facilitating connection between the Uber driver and the Uber rider. It can be Amazon Marketplace facilitating the connection and the exchange between people who have something to buy and people who have something to sell, like third-party sellers. It could be social media networks that facilitate connection among users and also through advertisers and other companies. What you see here and what matters is, again, this concept of feedback loop. Economists call them network effects. Positive network effects exist with platforms in that more people use the platform on one side. For example, the more people log on Google search because they want to have a result to their search, well, the more the platform itself become attractive to another side here, the advertisers, who are going to get more value from connecting to Google if Google has lots of users on one side. That positive feedback loop between the availability on one side, the engagement of one side, and the engagement of others has consequences on competition, because it tends to lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy or a positive momentum, and in some cases lead to even a winner-take-all outcomes, although not in all cases, but it can lead to monopolistic situation by virtue of just your market forces. So these connections between the two sides are called indirect network effect, and you see they exist, the more in all these different examples, and all the platforms have that characteristic. The more of one, then the more attractive it becomes to the other. Now, there is another kind of platform, another kind of way in which platforms create value is by facilitating innovation. And when I was giving you the example earlier on of how Apple iOS really facilitates innovation as if it was a central big Lego block within a system, facilitating innovation to produce for others to innovate on complementary products or technologies.
Can I just tell you, Annabelle, 4 minutes,
yes.
4 minutes left.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That's very helpful. So you can see that innovation platforms facilitate the development of complementary innovation. And the difference, therefore, between innovation platform that exists within a firm, across a supply chain, or an industry platform, is that all of them have platforms at the core and complementary products at the periphery, but the difference is who gets to have the right to innovate at the periphery. So for internal platforms, what you have is a company that does both the core and all the complements. You see that in products such as, Black & Decker, that has a hand tools with lots of different attachments. They make the hand tool, they make the attachment. Or the Philips case, where they make the hairdryer core and they also make all the different attachments. In the context of the supply chain, you're going to have a company that is going to, like an automotive company that is going to bring the chassis together, but the different piece that plug in can be made by others within the supply chain. For example, the engine makers will be a different company. And then what we are talking about often here in the case of digital platforms is where anyone that has software capabilities can develop apps and services. And obviously that opens up the field of who can innovate on top of the platform. Now that we understand this better, you see that in fact, there are two types of ways in which platforms create value, either facilitating transaction or facilitating innovation. And what we see is the more powerful companies actually do both. Like Apple has an app store and the iOS, and Google has Google Play and Google Android, et cetera, et cetera. So then we see that platforms, create value in all these different ways. And I've just finished a report for the European Parliament, which is accessible online for everyone, that looks at not just the positive effect, but also the negative effect of platforms in terms of their increased centrality as bottlenecks and the fact that because of their centrality, they tend to be capable of adopting abusive behaviors and practices vis-a-vis either smaller companies or individual users. There is also an effect of employment, which I will detail more in the next slide. Lots of new jobs, and flexibility, but also precarity, risks shifted to workers, and workers undergoing lots of surveillance and control, as well as a lack of collective action. And we've heard many things about, and I'm not going to go more in detail around the lack of accountability and privacy risks and online harm and concerns about a surveillance society. As we all know, there are currently the DMA and the DSA, the Digital Market Act and Service Act, and other regulatory efforts that are trying to come to a regulatory solution to some of the issues that were not fully covered by existing antitrust. Now, moving on to the question of skills. And we see that there are different policy options for regulation, but for working conditions and labor, we suggest in the report to redefine the category of employee and provide to platform workers the same social protection as other workers, set minimum wages, and extend their worker rights over data, as well as support platform cooperative. And it's important to work together to across silos to ensure the benefits of the digital economy for all. And this will now be my last slide. Platforms and ecosystem will for sure become the dominant form of business organization. No sector is immune to this disruption. There are lots of opportunities for value creation, but this is in a context of intense global competition, where Europe is only one block, and US and China are really driving the platform economy in terms of successful platforms so far. But skills are an essential part of European strategy to bring the benefits of the digital economy for all. Europe needs to upskill its workers to take advantage of what the digital economy has to offer. In terms of jobs, we need to think beyond crowd workers and gig worker. There is a growing importance of digital and platform ecosystem professionals with expertise on how platforms create value and how platforms deliver value. And can you just put back the slide for 1 second, please?
30 seconds left.
And there will be new jobs at all levels, including operations, service, strategic management. And just to conclude, the skills required will go way beyond digital literacy. It will be a combination of business and tech skills at all levels and entrepreneurial skills. And for that, new forms of training over the arc of people's career is going to be relevant, and a better coordination between companies, universities, and regulatory authorities. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Annabelle. This is really interesting knowledge you are sharing with us. And I think there's so many new opportunities and new, I would say, in-between spaces in the making. And you really unpacked and unmasked knowledge of the platform economy. Thank you. We will now move on, and we've got the opportunity to discuss with Annabelle Goya more in details and take some time to try to explore different things about what she was sharing. So Annabelle, from all your experience as a thought-leading expert on digital platforms, which we clearly heard about, and that was very interesting, what would be your advice regarding actions to be taken for regulating online platforms here in Europe and globally?
Thank you. I think Europe is going already in the right direction. And Europe has developed an agenda to regulate platforms. And currently, just this year, we are in the process of two important pieces of regulation, the Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act, which are being examined in the normal regulatory scrutiny process by the European Parliament. Already 2 years ago, there was a first piece of regulation called also, specially focused on platforms, called the Platforms to Business Regulation, P2B, which aims at eliminating potential unfairness in practices that stem from an asymmetry of power between big platforms and smaller companies that are dependent, increasingly dependent upon platform to operate their business. So I think that we don't want to over-regulate, because obviously technology is moving very fast, and we don't want to put rules that are going to prevent innovation and competition to happen. But I think the regulators have understood that market forces left without regulation will not lead to competition. They will lead to a lack of competition. And so what we want to make sure, and I think Europe is going in the right direction, is to set up a set of rules that will allow newcomers to come in and not huge barriers to entry to be erected by the platforms that have achieved the degree of dominance that they have. So I think regulation is going at the right pace and in the right way. I also see more interest in terms of regulation of the employment and social rights of workers, and I think it's also going in the right way. So the devil, however, is in the detail, and what is important to be vigilant about is the implementation of the regulation once the regulation will be approved. Will there be enough resources given to the regulatory agencies to do the monitoring, to have processes that facilitate dialogue between the company and the regulators? Okay. Will they put in place mechanisms where either small and medium enterprises or individual users can say, we have a problem with this platform and it can be dealt quickly without asking, big lawsuits to happen. Yeah. So there are concrete propositions that are on the board, on the table. There has been a very impressive effort of regulators, academics, lawyers, companies themselves. And there is a real collective dialogue at a very high level with concrete propositions, which I've tried to summarize in my latest report. But there are lots of things that are going, I think, in the right direction. And I have personally never been involved in so many discussions over the last few months, maybe 15 different roundtables with people who are really at the core of this process, rapporteurs of the proposal regulations, councils at the very high level of the big platform firms, representative of trade unions and of civil society. Right. This is really encouraging.
Great to hear that we are on the right track, we're on the right speed. But can I, before I take the next question, just listen, when I listen to what you say, have you also seen some great examples of policy prototyping into this? Because it's to have to regulate. Has that been the case or not?
Well, absolutely. And I think the regulators themselves are not inventing anything from scratch. The story that we see unfolding now is in a way an old story. If you look, and I just finished writing an article with two co-authors, a professor from MIT, Michael Cosomano, and David Yoffie from Harvard Business School. If you look at lots of other industries, for example, the media broadcast industry, or the advertising industry, or the cigarettes industry, these industries also went through periods of a lot of innovation and a lot of appetite from consumer, and then they got into a wall, a backlash, or people realized there were some problems with these technologies and they have to be regulated. And you see that it happens in all the sectors. And in the end, what works best is a combination of regulation and self-regulation. So toxicity, doesn't come just from online harms. It has come from other things we have dealt with, that have safety issues, right? For example, regulatory concerns around antitrust. This is not the first time we see that. The very rules of antitrust were created a century ago because the infrastructure makers of the day, the railroads, for example, were really playing the role of the big digital platforms today, right? And the reason why we have had regulated industries is not because they came out fully formed as regulated industries, right? So none of the issues, the profound issues that we are facing are entirely new, but the way they present themselves is different. And that's what I recommend in my report. We have to go back to first principle. We have to go back to guide us in an environment that moves very fast, both in terms of technology, companies, and business models. We have to say, what is it that we want to preserve? Yeah. And I very much like the presentation of Mr. Klein earlier that made a clear distinction about what machines can do best and what humans are best at. Well, we need to have that same kind of outlook, looking at what is it that we want to preserve with these tools and technologies. Yeah. And we realize actually we care about privacy. We care about rights to data. We care about sovereignty.
So can I link upon your insights and outlook and maybe also the foresight. Say the major international big corporations, they are likely to have a platform on ecosystem strategy and everything seems to be in place. But do you have some more general advice for SMEs and what to do for creating the necessary ecosystems? And I think that's very importantly, how to develop the right skills for creating smart platform services with the SME sectors. So I think if you take that.
That's a great question.
Please
that
go
is
on.
The question of the day. Absolutely. So in my recent book, again, with Michael Somano and David Joffe, The Business of Platforms, we have a whole chapter about that. What can incumbent firms do? We identify 3 possibilities. Either you buy a platform, or you build a platform, or you belong to a platform, okay? So belonging to a platform means, you're going to do your work, you're going to buy and sell on Amazon, or if you're a hotel, you're going to buy and sell on Booking, okay? That's one possibility. And it's really good for SMEs to have access to consumers. The problem, however, is that up until recently, the governance of the platform were not so scrutinized, and there could be abuses of power. Another possibility, a negative possibility, is that the platform itself starts competing with you. So you lose bargaining power. So that could be good in the short term, but in the long term, I wouldn't say it's a very safe bet until those new regulations are in place. Okay. So that's why many platforms actually welcome these regulations, because what we see now is a deficit of trust from small companies to the platform. Yeah. The second possibility is to build a platform yourself. Now, if you're a small firm, you don't have the means to do that. So then there is a possibility and a good, I think, scenario of building a coalition of firms in your own sector or in your own vertical, and take ownership of designing a platform that would work for the collective of your vertical. And I think for B2B platforms, in particular verticals, there is a lot to do there. And what we see is new players that are actually offering almost the skeleton of platforms without going all the way to the applications level. And then you see companies in those verticals using them. So buying a platform, building a platform, or belonging to a platform.
Thank you very much. Very concrete answers to the question. Let me also ask you about the future of labor platforms and work in the digital platform economy. So what hands-on changes needs to be put in place to ensure all benefits from the digital platform economy, you think, linked to now when we have a new, I would say, process between employee and employers?
Right. So I touched upon that very briefly in my presentation. I think we have a lot of work to do there. I think that whereas in the regulatory sort of antitrust and even privacy, I think there's been a lot of good effort in terms of regulation. I see that we're only at the beginning of putting new rules in place that protect the rights of workers that work through the work platforms. And I see that there has been worrying trends of companies trying to make people work in the same way in terms of what the workers have to do, except that the employers would not contribute to the social cost and the social risks associated with that. So I think here there needs to be a clear action from regulators to make sure that workers do not get exploited, so that society doesn't end up paying the cost of a modality of work that shifts all the risk to the workers. And I think this is quite important.
Yeah. Do you see any kind of issues between the age groups on that platforms? Probably it's more maybe younger mid-aged people, but what do you have a comment on that perspective?
I think it depends whether you're talking about very low skill type of work and higher skill type of work. I think that the younger generation is extremely familiar with using digital technology. So of course it gives them an advantage, but they're also more fragile in terms of precarity and access to careers and jobs that are long-term and that give benefits. Yeah. So on the one hand, you could think of them are more equipped to operate in the digital economy, but on the other hand, they do not benefit from the social protection and the structures that the older generation has benefited from. Okay, so I think it's the responsibility really of the people who are more established and who have more security in their work life, and managers and owners and investors and regulators, to make sure that we put the structures in place so that that young generation has a chance to have careers and meaningful work where they can make enough money to have good lives.
Okay. I would say thank you so very much, Annabelle, for this very enlightening and value-creating discussion. I think we could go on for an hour more here. But this knowledge, I think, and sense that will really help us a lot for the future from now on. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
So now we move to the theme skills, jobs, and the platform economy. And this will be together with an expert panel dealing with skills, jobs, and the platform economy. As already outlined by Annabelle Goya, online platforms are seen as an enabler for new services and high-skilled jobs, but also, I would say, a lever for accelerating the gig economy. To best perform in the platform economy requires the right mindset and T-shaped skills profiles we spoke about yesterday, and upskilling is becoming increasingly important and will be critical for the very ambitious targets set by the European Commission to increase and upskill the European talent pool. We are now very happy to have 5 distinguished experts with us here today. So let me now welcome Willy Lejonwirta. He is Professor of Economic Sociology and Digital Social Research at the Oxford Internet Institute. Willy leads research projects which investigate remote work on online labor platforms. He's also a member of the European Commission's high-level expert group. Welcome. Then we have Sangeet Paul Chaudhary. Sangeet is the founder of Platformation Labs and a C-level advisor to many and more, I would say 35 out of the Fortune 500 companies, and author of several best-selling books on the online platform economy. We cannot go through all the books here, but that's an amazing thing. He is connecting with us from Singapore today. And also Maxime Superti. He is Director of Social Affairs Department at Business Europe. We also have Oliver Rötisch. He is Regional Secretary, UNI Europa Group. And then finally, Sebastiano Tofaletti. He's General Secretary of the European Digital SME Alliance. So let's now start with the different experts and stakeholder views of implications for jobs and economy and Upskilling Europe 2030, all related to increasing the talent pool and options for platform governance. So let me start with you, Willy. You are examining how digital technologies such as platforms and marketplaces are shaping the organization of economic activities in society and the implications for workers, consumers, business owners, and policymakers. You also develop proposals of how they could be governed. So, question is, what would be your advice to European business, specifically SMEs, on how best to tackle this topic, focusing on skills development? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. That's obviously a very broad question, but let me try and offer a concise answer. So let's say you're an SME somewhere in Germany or France, you're selling shop furniture or something like that, and you want to make use of the opportunities of the platform economy to expand your business, to address new markets, to find new customers. But to do that, you need to develop new skills. You need your team to have new skills. So your marketing person needs to learn social media marketing. Perhaps your salesperson needs to learn how to list products on platforms and which platforms to list them on and how to get advantageous terms and so on. And perhaps your accounting person needs to develop new skills for how do you account for payment processor fees or platform intermediary related complex financial transfers. How do you develop all of those skills? Before we look at that slide, if we consider the options in your immediate environment, so you perhaps you have a vocational training provider in your neighborhood, so you might be sending your staff to take a course, but it's a 6-month course. Can you afford that? Is the information still up to date, or might it be outdated since the platform's policies and systems keep changing very rapidly? You might take an online course, a MOOC, but are the skills there relevant? We've seen MOOCs after the initial excitement, sort of the expectations have leveled down a little bit. So what we did was we looked at how actual platform professionals, and now we can take a look at the slide. So freelancers in Europe who are making their income by doing work like social media marketing, software development, virtual assistant services, accounting, and other professional services. So people who are day-to-day selling their services through online platforms in Europe to clients in all over the world. How do they keep their skills up to date? How do they reskill? So if you look at the graph on the right, so you can see that a minority of them, they use paid online tutorials like MOOCs. They attend training courses and workshops. So this would be a traditional educational provider in your neighborhood. Quite many of them take free online courses and webinars, but a lot of the learning, it takes place on community forums, and it takes place in a peer-to-peer fashion from other people who are doing the same kind of work. So they're participating in communities of practice online. And so if the point is, if your staff is not already participating in peer-to-peer groups, in communities of learning online, that's the first thing to do, is to try to get them engaged there. And because that way you get on the spot, just in time learning. Now, does that mean traditional formal education is not needed anymore? No. I mean, if you take a look at the graph on the left side of the slide, you'll see that, in fact, these people whom I'm talking about, who make their living on these platforms, they're highly educated. They have higher than average degrees than the general population, which means that in order to have those learning skills, you need to have a basis in formal education.
Can I ask you another question, because time is running? What would be your recommendation on the European Commission and the national governments, also with respect to existing harmful practices within the online platform economy and issues around platform, and when it comes to governance?
Yes, well, that is a very important question, a very broad question. But one thing that I would say there is we need to support platform users, whether they be SMEs or freelance workers, gig workers. We need to support them coming together, associating and expressing their needs with a collective voice towards the platform owners. And that way they have a better chance of influencing the platform's policies and rules in ways that fit their interest, and also get a more equitable share of the value capture that Annabelle was talking about, so that the users of these platforms, whether they be European SMEs or gig workers or whomever, that they are able to negotiate a bigger slice of the pie, essentially, to themselves from the platform owners. And that requires them coming together, and policymakers can support that through various means.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful to hear. So now we move over to Sanjit, and you are an advisor to 35 of the Fortune 500 firms and companies. So if I now ask you, if you put yourself in the role of an ordinary SME, producing and selling products and services, how can they best reap the benefits of the platform economy?
Yeah, I think what's really important is when we think about the platform economy, and especially as an SME participating in it, we need to make a distinction between two different types of platforms. There are platforms that fundamentally work by aggregating demand and using that to attract supply. And there are platforms that work by uplifting or empowering the supply. The platforms that typically create a bottleneck on the demand side and through that attract suppliers, they tend to end up exploiting, or they're more likely to end up exploiting suppliers than the platforms that provide the tools and the picks and the shovels for the suppliers to actually build their business on top of them. And so if you take just a few examples, companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook, a lot of these companies rely largely on creating a bottleneck over demand, versus companies like Shopify, for instance, rely on creating infrastructures for the whole economy. So one key aspect to look at is, if you're getting onto a platform, is that primarily helping you scale up as a producer, or is it primarily helping mediate your relationship with the consumer and create new policies to mediate that relationship over time? So that's one aspect. The second issue to think about is that platforms work when they mediate transactions at scale. In order to mediate transactions at scale, they have to commoditize and standardize these transactions. Commoditizing and standardizing a transaction eventually means that they need to commoditize and standardize the skill that went into participating in that transaction. So the more a platform mediates commoditized and standardized work, and the more the nature of work on a platform becomes standardized, there's enough research, and I've done a ton of research on this with the ILO, to kind of lay out how the workers on such platforms over time become exploited, because it's in the benefit of the platform, and it's actually in the benefit of an efficient market to standardize and commoditize the worker's skill. On the other hand, there are markets where instead of commoditizing worker skills, the platform encourages the long tail of worker skills, because the demand, actually there's a long tail of demand, and in order to serve that long tail of demand, you need a long tail of skills to serve it. And this dovetails very closely into how to think about regulation of these platforms, because when you're thinking about regulation, you need to look at whether a platform is commoditizing and taking power away from a worker, or whether it is creating the tools and mechanisms for the worker to level up and improve their output in the economy. And there was something really important that Willie shared over here, that one of the best ways to engage or interface with large platforms as individuals in a platform economy is through collective action. What's happening increasingly in the platform economy is now we have new interesting ways of collective action. We have algorithmic unions, for instance, where you can take your data from a certain platform. If regulation forces platforms to open up their data, especially around worker reputation and market access for workers, that data could then be provided as an API to a third-party union, algorithmic union, which could then aggregate this data across a lot of different workers at scale and negotiate with the platform on their behalf algorithmically. So the very aspect of unionization changes as well. But then regulation has to move that and create that openness. And this is, at this point, this is not just theoretical, it's already happening, for instance, in the music industry, where there are labels in the US, which are algorithmic labels working on behalf of creators to see which of their music is being pirated on remix videos on YouTube, and then negotiating with the platform on their behalf. So these are factors that have played out, and I believe will increasingly play out in the form of new forms of collective action. But I really believe that at the heart of it, we need to start by asking ourselves these two specific levers. What is the nature of the platform? Does it aggregate demand primarily, or does it support supply primarily? Platforms will do a combination of both. What does it do primarily? And secondly, what is the nature of the transaction? Is it a transaction that benefits from commoditization at scale, or is it a transaction that benefits from a long tail market where the platform incentives and the market incentives are aligned with the producer's incentives? And regulation should then follow these two axes.
So when it comes to regulations, would you say we are on track, as we heard before here in Europe, what you say when it is a platform of SMEs? Will you second that?
I think there are certain aspects of regulation where I would say that this is increasingly being understood very well.
10 seconds.
I think to the extent that we're regulating commoditized work on food delivery platforms and ride-hailing platforms, I think we've seen a lot of progress in the last 4 years.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Sangeet. And now we move over to Maxime. And what I would ask you, what are the main challenges to improve skills training to underpin a competitive European industry?
Thank you so much, and big pleasure to be with all of you today to share Business Europe's views on the very important topics of Skills for Industry. Well, I've heard with interest what was said by the previous speakers on the platforms, but indeed I'd like perhaps to bring a bit of a broader picture of where we stand, and also reflecting on what we do as social partners in the process, as the European Union is now in the middle of different policy debates. The first thing is that we are just now in the middle of finding a good way forward in terms of technology that brings us towards innovation and growth. And technology is being changed very rapidly, and this is an opportunity. We need to go ahead with it. As social partners in Europe, I think it was very positive that we could reach, together with the trade unions, an agreement on digitalization that is, I think, the common basis to try to get to these opportunities and reap the benefits of digitalization. But of course, this is going with adaptation. And that means that this transformation that is happening in the economies, we need to make them able to deliver for the workforce as it is now, and also able to adapt to the new jobs that are being created. And I think that the two challenges are, of course, a bit different, but they are entering into the same connection with labor market needs. And we need to improve the match between jobs and skills. It's a key priority. And it's also true when it comes to the platforms that are there as new business models intermediating. And I agree very much with what was said previously. I mean, the services were there before, there some extent have been improved, or some new services have been developed on top of what existed before. But in essence, it's just about reaching better to the markets and connecting better supply and demand. And that is, of course, something that is positive, but that needs to be organized. The challenge in that respect for the policymakers is that defining what is work and what is self-employment is a national competence. We had long debates at European level for that, so the EU should not interfere in this. But the EU, of course, has a role to organize information sharing and cooperation between policymakers and social partners so that good solutions are found in each country. And that is the agenda ahead. We are just consulted as social partners on these issues. It's also important, of course, to organize the self-employed in a way that is appropriate in view of their nature. And for that, that means to have some forms of collective representation that are different to employees, because self-employed are not employees, they are undertakings.
Yeah. So can I also connect you to this question? How can we make good use of technology to augment human work productivity while focusing on human tasks at work where humans' qualities compared to machines can best be brought into a new type of fruitfulness?
That is a very good question, and I think this is at the core of what we need to find out. And when you look at the machines and the humans, of course, repetitive tasks are well done by the machines, and I think it can provide support to the workforce. It can also provide improvements in terms of health and safety at work, so we should really make the best of this. But on the other end, of course, it is also identifying what is at the core of what humans can bring in terms of the work processes. And what are those things? I mean, I think it's about the service orientation, being able to meet the requests and needs of different customers, engaging in a process of listening, being able to understand the needs, to engage in a dialogue, to have emotional intelligence, to connect with different customers and adapt to the demand. And of course, that is something that is close to our hearts as human beings. It needs to be embedded into skills training systems. And that is a big challenge today. We need to find the right approach in cross-industry needs and sectoral needs. In the sectoral needs, you need to have the technical focus, but across the economy, we have a strong need for IT skills and for human skills. And IT skills connects also with STEM skills development. We need scientific, technological, engineering, and mathematics to be much stronger in Europe. We have proposed a target of 25% of tertiary graduates in STEM by 2030, when we are today at 21%. We need to reform universities to make them more relevant for lifelong learning. We need to work together as social partners to improve our training funds and to make sure that the training offer is going to be improved and also scaled up so that we reach as much as possible more adult participation in training. There is a goal of 60%. It is very ambitious, but we think we can make progress towards that goal.
Great. Thank you very much, Maxime. So you say we need AI, artificial intelligence, and we need AI, authentic intelligence as well.
Well, I say that we need to make sure that whatever we do, we are going to find the right balance, that we engage in productivity, improvements, and at the same time make our workforce motivated.
Yes. So let me then move to Oliver. As already mentioned before here, business, the ways of operation and business in purchasing, production, sales, they are increasingly being disrupted by platforms with consequences to, workforce. So I would ask, what are the trade union demands with respect to the avoidance of harmful practice?
Thank you. And as trade unions, as a European Services Workers Union, of course, we are very much engaged in it. When we talk about the platform economy, that is really one economy which is essential for the services sectors. However, when we talk about platforms disrupting industry, that is only one way of looking at it. When I look at it as a trade union in terms of labor, I think it is more in the sense of creating confusion and then profiting from that confusion. Let me elaborate this on 3 points. First, when we look at persons working through platforms, there's no real issue for those who are employees. They are just simply employees. Secondly, we have then the bogus self-employed. And for the bogus self-employed, it's really an issue of enforcement and not of giving them a separate status. And then we are left with the genuine self-employed workers. And there, quite frankly, between self-employed workers who are working on a platform or offline, there is not that much of a difference. The system of self-employed workers has persisted over at least 100 years. And quite a clear reply to Maxime, self-employed workers, genuine self-employed workers are not undertakings. They are in the first place workers. So the second point is, when we look at platforms, I'm convinced that there is more difference between different type of platforms than between some kind of jobs that are exercised offline and online. When we look at the provision of services by online or by offline, that's a bigger difference than between a driver who basically works through Uber or through a taxi exchange. And the same is true between high-end and low-end jobs. There's a total difference between an IT specialist and somebody delivering food. And the third element then is, when I look at the business model of companies like Uber, I think it is actually failing. It is based on profiting from paying employees, workers worse than their competitors in the offline world, and is also hoping for the state allowing them to break the law with regard to others who can't. Taxi drivers is one of the examples. So it's a bit of a Ponzi scheme, which is financed in some cases by investors who put more and more money in, but the companies are actually not needed to make a real profit. So what we really need there is an enforcement of the law for everyone, whether platform workers or not. So let's treat workers the same. There's no separate reason for a separate category. What we need is real enforcement of the laws that already exist.
Thank you. And can I go on here and ask you, what would be the high up on the agenda for your to-do list for the national and European policymakers, linked to what you just said? If you create that list, give us those points. This is a must-do right now.
From my side, let's go back to basics. And I think Willy has said this and sung it as well. We need to create a collective voice for the workers. That we have to do. And there is a commitment by the European Union to strengthen collective bargaining. And I think that we have to do in a systematic way. How can we strengthen collective bargaining? And that brings me also back to the issue of skills. Because skills nowadays workers need constant upskilling. And how can you do this best? If you do it as close to the workplace as possible. And there the social partners, employers and trade unions are best placed. They know what is happening. They have the network. And on top of it, if you do it through the social partners, you also don't disadvantage small and medium-sized companies, because you can do this at branch, at sector level. That is one of the models we have to strengthen. And then really, when I look at the European environment, let's see how the EU can really facilitate it. The Commission, in terms of its proposal on a minimum wage, is proposing national action plans to raise collective bargaining coverage in Europe to 70%. The European Parliament in December came out and says, in 2030, we want to have 90% of the workforce covered by collective bargaining. So that we should implement. So what we need, support the capacity building of the trade unions as well of the employers, because social dialogue, collective bargaining, dealing with the issues that challenges our industries offline and online is best solved by those people who are closest, that is the social partners. They need the capacity. And then third, which is the lowest hanging fruit and the strongest tool that we actually have in Europe, is the European Union and governments should use the ability of financing. So simply say, if you want to have a contract with a public authority, you need to have a collective agreement. You need to be a good social partner as an employer as well. And then we together can do our job to the benefit to all and create a win-win-win situation, a triple win situation for society, workers and business.
Thank you very much, Olivier. So now it's time for Sebastiano. So what do you see as the main challenges for SME and freelancers with respect to use of business platform on the one hand and labor platforms on the other hand?
Well, thank you for the question. Let me try to answer that and also react a little bit to what I heard from the other very interesting interventions until now. As you know, the European Digital SME Alliance, which I represent today, is an organization that represents more than 45,000 SMEs and startups in Europe, which are at the forefront of the digitalization, of the digital technologies, really. And first of all, let me say that the skills gap, the skills issue is the issue number one for many of these companies, and it is really what is preventing them from growing and delivering more jobs and growth to Europe. And especially in this recovery phase, we see this as the very fundamental issue. So I'm very glad that we are having this discussion today about skills for industry. Because this is problem number one, in my opinion, for Europe nowadays. Now, the issue is what is really the strategies for SMEs to go into digitalization, and what is the role of platforms in that? I think, first of all, let me say that there is a wrong understanding, and it's probably due to ignorance, when I speak to many politicians who just tend to think that the digitalization for SMEs equals SMEs going into platforms, so becoming users of platforms. And I must say I strongly disagree with that, okay? We need to understand how SMEs get the maximum benefits out of digital technologies. And let me also remind you, what is the Gartner definition of digitalization? It does not equal to becoming users of platforms. Gartner, and we agree with that definition, defines digitalization as the process of rethinking a company's business model in order to generate value through digital technologies. So, you really need to rethink your business model, and you need to understand what do I have to do to get the maximum value out of these technologies. And one issue is, will I become a user of platforms, and will I need, those skills that were mentioned by Will, for instance, probably hiring freelancers or someone who can help me be successful on social media. That is certainly one strategy, but there is much more I should think about, and I should probably think about how do I diversify my business model? How do I generate a value for my consumers? How do I make my consumers more loyal? And what do I do if I go into a platform? Because there are, nowadays entrepreneurs are asking themselves very important questions. Is this platform competing against me unfairly? How are they ranking me? Are they stealing my data? Are they taking my data to compete against me directly? Yeah. And unfortunately, the issue is that they do. So, especially for the companies we represent, which are in the IT sector, I'm talking in particular about those who need platforms, okay, such as the app developers, for instance, okay, they need to go to sell these apps typically through app stores. So
can I ask you here, linked to what you are saying, what needs to be in place for the SMEs then to enable them to play the active role which we're all dreaming of?
Well, first of all, we need to help the SMEs understand what answers they give to their strategic questions. And then, in the cases where they have to go on a platform, I like very much what was said by the previous speakers, especially Willy and Sangeet, that there is the issue of collective actions. This is very important. Let me say, my organization, several years ago, it was about 5 years ago, we already went into an antitrust case as a third party, the one against Google Android, where Google was fined by the European Commission for 4.2 billion euros. Why? Because Android, through its App Store, was essentially exploiting data to the detriment of those who use this App Store. And more recently, we have supported the case of Spotify against Apple. Again, it is a very, very similar issue. And even more recently, we are very much supportive of what the Commission is trying to do with its proposal, DMA and DSA, the Digital Markets Act, because this is really about, regulating the platforms for the benefit of those who have to use those platforms. A bit before that, there was the platform to business regulation, where again, the Commission luckily understood that, as a regulator, they had the role to play in creating the fairness for the companies who have to use the platforms nowadays. So the issue is a bit more complex than what some politicians or policymakers like to think.
Thank you very much. And we now, after these questions, organized questions, so to speak, we would like to allow us to have a conversation a little bit more free. Maybe there are someone of you who just would like to say, I really would like to say this, and you can get 30 minutes to do that, to end your speech, so to speak. But I would like to, so feel the freedom to just raise your hand and do so. But I would like to say, thinking about all this with the skills jobs and the platform economy, and if you think out loud and really to make a condensation about what are the, from your point of view, what's the real biggest opportunity you see? And what is the real biggest threat you see? You touched upon this, and it's the platform war someone speaks about, and there are so many opportunities, and there are so many issues on the table. So this is a part of a kind of a SWOT analysis. But I just want your personal comments on where do we are on this. So who would like to go first on this the biggest opportunity and the biggest threats? I will start with Willy. You're up on the top here, and you've got maybe a half minute left before. So please go on with your comments on this. Very short, but nevertheless.
Thank you, Chair. I think that regulations that Sebastiano mentioned are very important. But one thing we need to be careful of is not to trigger a geopolitical war to nationalize platforms or to regulate platforms so heavily that they essentially become an extension of the state. And why is that? It's because here in Europe, we're platform poor. Most of the platforms that we use in our day-to-day business and social life, they're based in the United States. And if we manage to trigger a situation where there's a race to nationalize platforms, suddenly we might find that we're doing business on foreign cyber soil. So I would rather see us try to strengthen the users of platforms and to strengthen platforms almost against certain types of state intervention. Thank you.
Oh, great. So strengthen the users and no over-regulation. Okay, great. Very inspiring here. So who is next? Yes, please. I see your hand. Go on.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think, first of all, I definitely agree with Will that the solution is not to nationalize platforms. For me, the issue is really what do we want to make as Europe out of this, the digital technologies and the digital revolution which is happening now? Do we want to be on top of it, or do we want to be just followers and users? And I think, the real chance we have is to understand how it works. And the issue is really with how do we make our companies really benefit from it. I heard previously the previous speakers talking about the Legos. You remember that? And I must say that she said that the platforms build the basic components of this Lego, and then other companies innovate on top of it. Well, I tend to disagree with that, because the issue is really that the platforms themselves have started using themselves the Lego, and the Lego is the open source code which is out there, and they have just put together open source code and code developed by others, and they were just able to put it all together, whether this was Google or Apple or others, and put it all together to create a service, right? And so, if we reap the benefits of the crowd innovation, which is possible through open source, through, source developed by, code developed by everyone, we can be, a very innovative economy where everyone is able to innovate on top of others. But in order to do so, we don't need to nationalize anything. We just need to make it more as open as possible. And the key, therefore, is interoperability and openness. The more we force interoperability and openness on platforms, the more we allow everyone to innovate on top of what others have done. And there we're going to be the winners of the digitalization. Otherwise, we are going to be only the users of others' innovation.
Okay. Thank you so much. Let's take Olivier.
Thank you. I mean, also from a trade union side, we have to get to the innovative potential of platforms, to this interconnectedness that we have in the online world. And we have to integrate this into the models that already exist, not creating a parallel world. I think that is important. And then from a European side, and I take Amazon as an example. I mean, Amazon goes a bit around like the Borgs in Star Trek, if you remember. I mean, they had this saying, you will be assimilated, resistance is futile. And when I look a bit like Amazon deals, at least with workers and also with our industries, they basically say you will be Amazonized and resistance is futile. And what we need here actually in Europe, turning the table on them and saying you will be Europeanized, resistance is futile. We just have to make sure that it fits into our system and it doesn't destroy the system. I mean, we have a wealth of experience of a social Europe of being successful, and let's integrate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, I see the hand raising here from Maxime. Please go on.
Thanks a lot. Well, I mean, building on the exchanges, I think coming back to the issue of skills, which is really at the center of our conference today, I think the challenge is on the one side to nurture creativity on the side of people and enterprises at the same time, because this is where the value will be in the future. And of course, this means we need to rethink a little bit the way we train people. Vili was starting by saying that the existing jobs and functions when we go digital are changing, and you need to have more transversal skills training, which is going to embed the IT into other types of skills. And that is very important to have this right. But what is essential in terms of the approach for policy is that we are quicker in changing the training curricula in view of changing job requirements. Today, education and training systems are very long to adapt. And I think it's very important that member states focus on that we are quicker collectively, that the social partners' input in the process is better taken into account, and that we are more innovative and more competitive altogether with a social agenda.
Thank you, very insightful. So let's, Sanjit, please give your comments on this.
Yeah, so going back to your point of what's the big opportunity and what's the big threat, right? I will polarize, I'll make a polarizing statement over here, but I believe that the platform economy is fundamentally designed to create inequality. That's just how feedback loops have always worked. And unless we really try to figure out how to address that inequality, in the design of these platforms, we will see increasing inequality. And just one variable of that, or one parameter of that inequality, is whether you bring differentiated skills for a long tail market or you bring commoditized skills where you are completely substitutable. If you bring differentiated skills, platform reputation can help you become even better. If you bring commoditized skills, the platform will figure out a way to commoditize you further and take a larger chunk of the transaction towards itself. So that's one thing that I feel pretty strongly about. I also agree with the point that Sebastiano was making, that a lot of innovation is actually built on open source code. Unfortunately, the challenge is that no matter how much we want interoperability and openness, the challenge is that until we figure out a way to get to open funding, we are not really going to have open business. What I mean by that is a platform today is venture capital funded, and a platform needs to get a certain level of funding to get to network effects, because before, at the time of launch, nobody finds value in a platform, but when everybody uses it, it's valuable. To get to that point where it's valuable, it needs a ton of funding. And to get that ton of funding, today, the funders want the returns back, which means that eventually platforms will be centralized in terms of funding and hence in terms of policy making. So we have to fundamentally figure out new ways of funding where funding is decentralized and hence ownership is decentralized and rewards are decentralized. Until we do that, and I believe we're beginning to see that with decentralized finance and the blockchain in its very early stages, but until we see that happening systemically, we won't have a scenario where platforms can create a fundamentally equal and uplifting world for everyone.
Thank you. I would now like to just end with you having type 10, 15 seconds to reply. And I would say now we've heard a lot, and we know this is the part of the new world. It's the platform economy, and we need to talk about skills. How do we get reskilled? How do we get upskilled? How do we get what we need for the future? So I would ask you guys or dear experts, to give your favorite skill to what is needed to be succeeding in this process. Just pick one. I know it's a lot of different skills we need. It's been integrated with wide and deep everything. Yes, we need that T-shaped skills. But if you pick your favorite skill, what is that? 10 seconds each. Please, you just jump in.
I'll just go first since I'm unmuted. And at the risk of sounding cliched, the most important skill would be learning how to constantly innovate and learn and redefine what you are doing in the context of the tools that are available to you. Because innovation will ensure that tools keep on changing. So if you do not keep on changing what you do based on how the tools are changing, you will be left behind.
Very good. Maxime.
Well, I will go perhaps a bit more philosophical on the answer to this question, because I said a lot in my previous interventions. I think know yourself is a very good advice.
Very good. Know yourself, then you know. Okay, great. So, Olivier.
I think it is make your voice heard, especially in a platform world where you're insulated from each other.
Great. And then we have Sebastiano.
Okay, it's a good question, and it is actually a question I often ask myself when I think about my children. What is the skill I'd like them to have to succeed in life? And I think I would agree 100% with Sanjit. I mean, the point is really learn to keep learning. And to keep innovating. There is no limit to what your brain can do if you are open to learn new things and to curious to discover and to innovate.
Great. And Willy.
Thank you. Critical thinking. Our economy needs it in the era of platforms. Our society and politics also need it in the era of platforms.
So if I continue here, do you feel you are walking the talk, you say?
Myself,
yes.
I'm in the privileged position of being able to work in a university where I do critical thinking all the time, but also I'm able to offer people the opportunity to learn that. So students, formal education, higher education, humanities, history, humanities. We need all of that also in the era of digital technologies.
Absolutely. But would you generally sense, being a professor at the university, you have the right to really think outside the box or thinking without the box, whatever. But do you see is it easy for people today to really stand up, to be different, to be a part of their real diversity, so to speak? Or is there some pressure for people today to be critical in their thinking and to communicate? Question.
Well, I would say that succeeding in the platform economy means you in some ways have to conform to the norms and expectations of the platforms. And individuals, whether you're an individual SME or a self-employed gig worker, it's very hard for an individual to challenge that. Hence the emphasis on collective action that I think all of us here today agree with.
It's a little bit David against Goliath. Okay, I understand. So indeed. I would say thank you very, very much to all these wonderful 5 experts, Willy, Sanjit, Maxime, Olivier, and Sebastiano, for a almost fantastic and great contribution for us. And I think we got a lot to think about. And that's really wonderful for all of us. Thank you guys for being with us. Now it's the time for us to do a different thing. And it's time for you to have your say. And let's now start with the polls. An exciting moment is here, and the access details to allow you to participate can be seen in the stream below you, and you can also find them in the chat. The polls is now open, and we have 3 quite hands-on questions for you. And it's also about going to mentimeter.com and check that out. And we have so Mentimeter.com, as you can see and read. And the number here to pull in is 5009 1052. I say it again, unbroken English, 5009 and 1052. So that's what you put in, and then you get access to these highly interesting questions. So the questions are, number one, what are the most important skills challenges for workers on digital labor platforms today? Number two, which would be the main barriers preventing SMEs and freelancers from using effectively online business platforms? And the question number three is, what is your opinion about skills development for platform workers and the role of governments regarding digital online platforms? And you have, as you can see, 1 to 10 regarding the points, the scale of points. So that is what you have to do. So this poll will stay open now for 30 minutes. So take your time to vote and to complete it. And the results, the poll will be presented at the end of today's conference, so we will really understand where we are. We will be very interested in to see where we are and what you think and why is that. And maybe have some comments regarding the outcome and the result of all of what we have just heard. So just for a second, sit back, relax, and enjoy yourself in your chair. Breathe deeply and look out to the window, if you have one, and get the sun in your face and think through, okay, what's my answer? Sometimes people are reluctant to not connect and to go online when we have the poll. I know this by myself, and I will now try to energize you to have your say, because we heard also from the speakers that it is important. We say, give a voice, we just heard from one of our recent presenters. And so take your time and to do this, and we will get the information, we will pull it together, we will show the results later on today. And again, I will say Mentimeter.com and 5009 1052. Right. We now are some minutes ahead of time, but I think people are queuing up in the digital world in this wonderful platform we have here today. And we are greeting you here out of Hamburg in Germany, in a wonderful place, and so on. So what we are going to do now is to have a good practice showing the way forward for the upskilling and reskilling of Europe 2030 vision and scenarios. That's what we're going to do. So in this session, we are going to present good practice programs, activities and initiatives for business transformation and upskilling to foster new services and job creation. And we will now have some different examples. And the first one is coming out of this very country of Germany. It's Bosch Learning Company Initiative, presented by Martin Goebbels, director of the Bosch Training Center. And Martin, he is also responsible for global competence management and digital learning. So please share with us, Martin. And the screen and floor is yours. We can't wait.
Yes, thank you, Jan. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to hear that you are in Hamburg right now, as this is my hometown. Now I'm talking to you from the Stuttgart area where Bosch is located. When I was preparing this talk, we are talking about the reskilling vision for 2030. I was choosing a background image, and first I had a digital background image, but then I choose this historical image here. You see a Bosch shop, something you would call a flagship store today. where you could buy some automotive parts like ignition plugs or something like this. And this is where Bosch comes from. The company has changed over the decades, and Bosch also produces tools, household aids, and also smart home devices, and also things you don't see, like sensors in your smartphone or other semiconductors. So learning and upskilling was always a part of Bosch's DNA. Now Bosch is on the edge in becoming a leading AIoT company, and upskilling demands increased massively in the last years. To tackle this, we founded the Bosch Learning Company initiative you just mentioned in 2017, and that really lifted upskilling on a whole different level in the company. So what did and what do we do? First of all, we use all modern forms or all forms of modern and digital learning. We try them all. We use e-universities like Coursera, edX, Udacity, and so on. We use virtual reality environments to conduct workshops. We use and develop learning apps, and also we use self-organized and informal ways of learning. So we try and develop all these formats, but in the beginning we kind of had two worlds. We had the traditional face-to-face training measures, plus the typical web-based trainings you have in a company. And on the other hand, we had all this new stuff, but it wasn't really integrated. And here I have to admit the pandemic situation was a kind of booster to integrate this, even for us. The use of these digital formats is the only way to fulfill the qualification demands with the necessary speed. We can't digitize everything. We have training for driving security or driving safety, for example, but we can digitize almost everything. When you do this, there's a great temptation to look just at the costs you can save, because of course you can save costs in this. My opinion is that it is also a great chance to look at the quality and at the user experience. Because not everything we did in the face-to-face world was always good or helpful for achieving our intended learning outcomes. The benefits of digital training is clear. You can integrate it in your daily work, you don't have to travel, and this opens up participation for a wider group of people. On the other hand, you have to integrate it in your daily work, and this is not always easy. And also the boundaries between working, learning, and free times, these boundaries are blurring. So a big role for being successful here is in creating the necessary learning culture in your company. And this, and we had to learn this, is strongly linked with leadership culture. From our point of view, our associates have to take some self-responsibility for their own development and for their own employability. And to do so, they need the managers who support them and who enable them in doing this. So when you look at the reskilling demands of our company, we have several programs addressing that. For example, we just integrate a tool and process system for skill-based workforce management. So what are the obstacles, or what were the obstacles in our way? I would like to give you one example. If you digitalize upskilling, you have to digitize the whole process chain. One example, in Germany, the role of the Works Council is very strong. In 2019, I sat in a meeting room with members of our Works Council, and we were discussing and negotiating rules and regulations for participating in new digital training offers. And this was a typical negotiation where both sides had their agenda, they also had their hidden agenda, and we were discussing and discussing and discussing. And we did this without involving the users, without involving our associates. And this is a typical mistake you make in digital product development. Digital products and services have to be developed with early prototypes, with early customer feedback, and in iterative steps. And as soon as we realized that we were doing these typical mistakes, we changed it. And I'm very happy that the Works Council also agreed here. We integrated our associates in the discussion. We agreed on temporary regulations, And we tested all the training process within these temporary boundaries. We collected user feedback and we developed our agreement step by step. The result was a highly fitting and well-accepted regulation. Our Works Council received a prize for this, by the way, some German Workers' Union prize for this innovative approach, and I receive a lot of questions from other interested companies, but we are very happy that we choose this way. Now we are trying to consequently follow our goals, and we have to find ways to steer this in our worldwide company. So what we are doing right now is that we are implementing some KPIs, some indicators that show us how we perform in the digitalization of training and how the quality of this training measures develops. We also implement a system to collect user feedback through the whole process chain of learning to consequently meet the demands of our associates. But still, I said we founded this in 2017. I have the feeling that we only just begun. And I hope this could give you a short impression on what Bosch is doing on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin, for such a great contribution and presentation, not least for your very honest and transparent approach, sharing with us what you have been through. I really agree there are very important perspectives from the inside out and the outside in. And without the outside in, we come nowhere. Thank you so much for what you just shared with us. The second example we will deal with now comes from CDFOP, Skills and Market Intelligence Services, which they have developed over the past years. And we will now listen to Antonio Ranieri, who will give us an overview of the CDFOP work on skills, intelligence, and future developments. So, the screen is yours, Antonio. You are muted. You are muted. Take it from the beginning. Welcome, Antonio.
Okay, thank you for your nice words. You know, we like to, I mean, our perspective is a bit different because we are a public center of research and policy analysis, so to say, and so it's a bit different perspective. I mean, we are quite proud of the work we are doing with skills intelligence. In a way, we say that in a way we have invented the skills intelligence in the European landscape, so to say. And we are quite proud of the work we are doing to innovate the way we try to make sense of trends in jobs and skills, and also possible challenges or disruptions, as we say now, which could affect the labor market in the future. So we have, of course, a macro general perspective. We have done this for many years, looking at these issues from different perspectives, long-term trends, our skills demand and supply forecast that we run at the European level, large-scale surveys to collect primary data from people, from workers, from companies, investigating specific skills, digital, green, key competencies. And the outcomes of this work actually are somehow presented in a certain way in our online platform that is Skills Panorama. Although we are now working to transform the entire set of resources on skills, labor, vocational training in a sort of hub where we can fully integrate different information and resources. By keeping the focus on skills intelligence, we are currently working to expand our capacity through new approaches and data sources. For us, this more rapid change and growing uncertainty that we are experiencing, not only because of the crisis, I mean, because of some long-term trends that predate the crisis, as we know, technology, demography, etc., has meant that we are working now on a new generation of skills intelligence. And one of the pillars is already well on the way, and it's about making use of big data that we collect in real time. This huge amount of data, for example, from online job vacancies at the moment, but possibly tomorrow from online CVs, but also patents, for instance, scientific papers, and so forth, different kinds of possible sources. This can allow us to go much deeper into skills within jobs offer a greater granularity of information, including, for example, at the sectoral level, occupations, regional, potentially local level. Now, to make sense of this data and translate it in actual intelligence, we need to make use of new approaches and new techniques, which are comparatively new also for us, like machine learning, artificial intelligence. And this can be a challenge, but actually it's not only a technical, but also a cultural challenge. This is a point that I think can be also something that also in the private sector they are experiencing. I mean, technical, yes, because if we want that this new skills intelligence can better combine insights from different sources, so to be smarter and also to be more timely and also to be more actionable by our users, our stakeholders, all this implies that the use of new data sources and also the use of new approaches and tools. But I mean, we believe, and I mean, we believe that today, when development of platform, vast processing power, data storage are becoming increasingly affordable, we have the preconditions for skills intelligence to become a reliable compass. That is our aim, I mean, for policy, for social partners, for the other education and labor market stakeholders, and even potentially for people who need to make education and training choices about how to approach and how to develop within the world of work. But probably, this is my point, what is even more complicated is that vocational training and skills policy is not only about predicting or anticipating, but also trying to shape the future. If you take, for example, the greening of the economy, this policy that we have at the European level, I mean, this crisis, this unpredictable crisis arrived last year, while at the European level we were redesigning the overall policy framework on vocational training policy, and the discussion about the new strategies has inevitably become intertwined with the need for a vision for how we can recover and rebuild in the wake of the crisis. Now, you know, Europe was quite brave because the choice was to move away from the temptation to say, okay, now the point is to survive, let's put aside the end of the world problem and let's focus on the end of the month problem. No, the choice was to keep a strategic long-term view of environmental and social sustainability through innovation, research, investment on people. But I mean, what are the implications for an intelligent skills intelligence? That we need to take into account, in a sense, paradoxically, that the European policies and the national recovery plans, for instance, will further accelerate change in the economy and will require an even greater ability to innovate and for people and businesses to adapt to the new challenges. So this is not something that you can predict simply on the basis of past trends or on the basis of data available on jobs and skills. So that's to say that would be a mistake to imagine that big data, sophisticated models, machine learning, artificial intelligence can do the trick per se, as a sort of plug and play technologies. As in other areas of policy, in vocational training, we need to achieve both short-term and long-term goals, and an emphasis on matching the immediate needs of people and businesses, that is more probably your concern in a sense, while also caring about supporting structural changes in the economy and society. So unfortunately, we cannot measure skills needs with data alone. And what really makes skills intelligence matter at the end of the day, it's us, our ability to translate data into meaningful insights and forward-looking policies.
Thank you very much, Antonio. Maybe I could ask you a quick question here now, and that is, I mean, I really like CDFOP's tagline here, the market intelligence services. When you do all these intelligent services, do you come across a lot of kind of business ignorance? Because there's a market ignorance, I think, very much today. So what is your take on your experiences in this area when you come with exciting, intelligent new opportunities from the market intelligence perspective? Do you sometimes receive a lot of market ignorance from different clients because they don't see the opportunities?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't talk about ignorance in a sense at the individual level. I mean, as I said,
no, corporate.
It's not only about predicting, but also shaping the future. This is true at the political level, if you want, but also for big companies, for instance. Now, data can help us to set our goals, but ultimately, we need to identify what kind of goals we want to select and pursue in the first place. This is to say that we need a mind behind the machine, and the mind that we need to make skills intelligence smarter is not only, for example, self-help, but a collective mind. So our end users, our stakeholders, the companies need to learn how, because it's the strategy and the questions we make that dictate how skills intelligence can help us. So the challenge is that we, all different actors, together need to understand how to make it work. And this has a lot to do, I mean, with some of the topics that were discussed over this today's event, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. So we need hardware, we need software, and we need mindware to connect what you said. All right, thank you so much. We are moving over here to our next speaker, and that is Johannes Pfeiffer from the Federal German Employment Agency. He will present us a case, an example from Lower Saxony, a European region in Germany, showing a regional industrial ecosystem of different stakeholders for and upskilling workers in the automotive industry, and this to make their skills future-proof. So please go ahead, Johannes, and tell us and learn us what you have been looking into.
Well, Jan, at first, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present concrete activities for shaping the transformation that are taking place in Germany and in particular in Lower Saxony and Bremen. Reskilling and upskilling are essential parts of this. Qualification of employees is a huge topic in Germany, of course, for good reasons. As you all know, according to the OECD, more than 50% of jobs located in Germany will be affected by automation or profound transformation in the next 15 years. The German states of Lower Saxony and Bremen are particularly affected as automotive and aviation states with their numerous supplier businesses. Green hydrogen for decarbonizing the economy and artificial intelligence with all its facets, for example, are no longer topics of tomorrow in our country as well as in Europe. They are increasingly meeting us in the working world every day in a very tangible way. This requires a qualified workforce, and therefore, if education is a success factor in the working world of tomorrow, actually already of today, then training and qualification is our answer to it. Yesterday and today, we have already heard excellent examples from Germany with the presentations by Ariane Reinhardt from Continental and Martin Goebbels from Bosch. There are, of course, numerous other projects and implementations, and these are also needed for the profound change in Germany and Europe. But, and this is the first message I would like to send you today, many activities lead to complexity, a complexity that we have to cope with in order to create synergies and reduce redundancies. And the first important step for that is transparency. Please, slide one, you can see that. And don't worry, you don't have to read all the details. It's just to see the complex system in total. Therefore, as a federal employment agency, we have drawn a picture that we call ecosystem innovation and training. It shows which activities exist in Lower Saxony and Bremen and how they are connected or have been connected. And just to give you an example, I would like to mention the Automotive Lower Saxony Dialogue or the Transformation Partnership. These initiatives have been closely linked with the hydrogen clusters or the National Platform for Mobility. And we thus have the opportunity to transform complexity into a positive force and achieve a better impact for all projects. And after all, we as a federal employment agency want to help shape the transformation proactively and in close cooperation with our partners. Please, slide 2. Using this example of the transformation partnership, I would like to show how it's possible to meet the challenges of transformation together. And together is a key word. In Lower Saxony, the Employers Association and Trade Unions Confederation have embarked on this journey together in the spirit of social partnership. Employees and companies are being trained as transformation pilots. In Germany, we say Transformationslotsen, in order to shape technological change from within the companies and to motivate their colleagues for the urgently required skill upgrades that are needed for the future. With the transformation pilots, companies start exactly where innovation is driven, the employees. The sustainable development of transformative competence requires pioneers who recognize innovation potential and initiate and support problem solving at an early stage. And what they all had in common was the realization that changes in companies fail if employees are not involved and their interests are not taken into account. And this would be detrimental to the company and its employees. The transformation pilots create an important precondition for ensuring that change processes are implemented in a way that is appropriate to the company and the people who work there. During their training, the transformation pilots receive knowledge from experts, for example, on the topics of Industry 4.0 or additive manufacturing. They learn to drive change and transformation processes in the company, translate industry trends for their work context, and act as contact points for the workforce. In our capacity as a German federal employment agency, we subsidize the training measures for companies under the Qualification Opportunities Act and the Work Tomorrow Act by assuming a proportion of the training costs and providing a subsidy on wages during the training period. The amount of the subsidy depends on the size of the company. Of course, smaller companies receive more support than large corporations do. And once they have completed their training, the transformation pilots receive a kind of access ticket to transformation hubs, which act as an innovation network to ensure the retention of know-how and a constant exchange of information. Networking and exchange of experience ensure that the pilots benefit from the experience of others. And as a third part, a high-profile advisory board at the state level provides impetus and visions to support implementation at a higher level. This concrete, practical example shows that transformation and the training of employees are major challenges. And this is my next message. They can only be overcome by working together. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Johannes, for a very interesting presentation with a lot of insights on this specific region. I think it really explains the need for a territorial perspective, which link us to very practical, I would say, applications and hands-on activities. Let me give you a question. What would you say about it sounds like this is a kind of cost-effective of working together with those social, I would say, collaboration partners. But how, if we expand that topic, how is, generally speaking, the funding mechanism and the budgets and so on in different governments working together? Do you have enough, or you lack funds, or is it a great, summer resting approach? Yes, tell us where we are on these funding issues and effectiveness of cost.
Money is always a problem. That is a very good question and honestly not easy to answer. No. Yes, there is a risk. To be crystal clear, the main responsibility for qualification is and will remain within the companies or with each employee. This is especially true for large companies, but many firms and employees, not only, but especially from small and medium-sized enterprises, they need support. And by the way, that is why the legislator has also staggered the funding conditions according to the size of the company. It must be well supported, and we have to make sure that there is a good balance. But one thing is also clear: doing nothing is not an option.
No.
Qualification secures innovation and employment, and I'm sure for that investments in this area pay off.
Yeah, so that means you really place the incentive at the company level to get action, and then also where the revenues will remain. Okay, thank you so much. We will come back to this in our coming discussion after we have heard all of the presenters. So the next example now is the case of new battery production in the very, very north of Sweden, in Skellefteå. And Bengt Ivansson, advisor to Northvolt and the city of Skellefteå, will tell a story which is about creating an attractive city, a new battery factory, a huge one, and a new battery value chain in a skills perspective. So the screen and floor is yours, Mr. Bengt. Please go on.
Thank you. I would like to tell you the story about how a city in the north of Sweden is changing. Picture number 1, please. We have, it's a city that have been actually shrinking in number of people living in it. And I have been a businessman in the city for 30 years, and I have been kind of upset with the mayor of my town, with the fact that I didn't think we were progressive enough or brave enough. So I became employed by the city, which was a big surprise. I became the business development director for the city. What happened was that the politicians decided to be for a growth strategy from 72,000 people to 80,000 people in 15 years. And it meant 8,000 people more, which maybe doesn't sound too much, but for us, it was a big step. And that meant that then we said that then we need at least 4,000 new jobs in the industry. And that became my task. And then what happened was that we were part of a competition about a huge battery factory that was looking for a site somewhere in Europe, and we were competing with 40 other sites actually in Sweden. And 2017, it was a decision made to place the factory in Skellefteå, and in the beginning, they were going to produce batteries for a capacity of 32 gigawatt hours. Now it has grown to 60 gigawatt hours. The big market is actually in Germany. Volkswagen is the biggest customer, and also BMW. And last week, it was decided that they will build the factory together with Volvo. So it's a big thing. It's a big thing happening in Skellefteå. We went to Reno to visit Tesla's battery factory there, and we learned that if there will be 3 other jobs at least created for every battery job. So we are looking forward to a growth of 10,000 new jobs, and if you have a partner and some kids, you could easily say that we will be maybe 25,000 new people in a city. And of course, that creates a lot of.
You are unmuted. We can't hear you.
Have I been muted all the time?
No. It was fine. Yes, go on. Okay. Go on.
Thank you. Good. I was afraid there for a while. And it has really 3 perspectives. Can you change the picture, please? It is skills. I mean, this whole thing is really demanding a lot of new skills and a lot of new people. We're talking about 3 areas of where that happens. And one is in the city itself. The other one is the general development of the industry in the city. And of course, also in the Northvolt factory itself. When we started this journey, we decided to say that we are the growth place for the new industry. And having said that, we were looking at what is the strength of our city, and realized that we have a DNA based on wood, metal, and energy. And we were looking for industries that would fit into this, that could have use of either one or maybe two or three of those of our of this DNA. And we had actually been looking for data centers, because if you have they need cold temperatures and they need a lot of energy. And in the north of Sweden, it's pretty cold and we have a lot of energy. The energy, by the way, in our part of the world comes from the rivers. So it's totally green, and we have a big volume of it. The third area is, of course, in the industry itself. The issues we are dealing with now is, of course, housing, people to how can we attract about 10,000 new people into the city, and in the area of the industry itself now we have become very operational, and I will talk a little bit about that. Next picture, please. The whole thing began with the politicians needed to be braver, and we needed a vision for the city. We needed skills for the planning of the city with the roads and the sports activities, the restaurants. We need to create an attractive city for people to move to. We also, secondly, we needed an organization in the municipality that was ready for investments of this kind. And I was really happy that the mayor and the city manager really decided to employ people from the outside, from the business environment. And of course, the third area is we need to train people for the industry itself. And what we do is we need to live really close to the industries. And it's not only the battery factory, because what happens now, there's a big movement between the companies, and people are looking for, if they've been a welder in a company, maybe they would like to work with battery production, and how can we train them to become ready for that? So we do a lot of upskilling and retraining. We find private education systems and the public education systems. We also provide relocation services. How can the family? How can we make it easy for a family to move to our city? Next picture, please. What we have seen as a common thread in all the three areas is that you really need brave politicians that is clear with direction. You need to be different. As I said before, we were competing with 40 other cities, and how could you make yourself interesting enough for them to listen to you? You also need to walk the talk. You need to do what you're saying, and you need to be proactive. We're talking with business people, and they are not interested in philosophies, or they are interested in actions. Also, you don't have time to negotiate on every question. So the work has to be based on trust internally in the organization of a municipality. And you could also say that an organization of a city also needs to be very entrepreneurial and allow the freedom of high activity, speed, and also you need to know what the future looks like and what's happening in the world. So it's been a big adventure. It is a big adventure. Only at the site now are 2,000 people working with construction. The house, the building itself is going to be 60 hectare, 60,000 square meters, the biggest house in Europe. So it's a massive building, and a big change for our city. So that's my story.
Thank you very much, Bengt, for this. Really interesting to hear. And let me go into a very short dialogue here. And I understood reading the newspaper, even if I live in the southern part of the same country in Sweden, I've heard and I read that Northvolt already having employees from 80 nations. And it looks like they're being a global diversity hub right up in Skellefteå. How are you coping with this attractiveness questions together with Northvolt, number one? And number two, I also read about common databases for all the big digital industry to try to connect people who are coming to support making it more easy to be upskilled and so on. So there seems to be a lot of very interesting activities going on. Please give us some comments.
Well, we have said that we do not want to become or trying to copy any big city. People are moving from Japan, from Tokyo, from Frankfurt, from the US. We are not trying to be any different city than we've been before, just more of the same thing. If you live in a skyscraper in Tokyo, you don't want to move to a skyscraper in Skellefteå. You want to have a piece of land, maybe build your house by the river. So that's what we're trying to offer. They would like, maybe the Scandinavian lifestyle. That's really what we're promoting. The cost of a piece of land in our town is a joke if you compare it with Tokyo, also with Germany, I would guess. So even though I would say that the cost of living has dramatically gone up, the housing market now, there's no free housing. So, before we were not building any houses. Now we're building about 1,000 to 1,500 per year as a consequence of this. Your second question, what was that, John?
Linked to the preparing a database between industries.
Okay. Yeah, what we do is we do a lot of things, and the database is one thing. But what that really is saying that there are areas in Sweden and in Europe with high employment rates. And we are trying to match the competence from other cities, other parts of Europe, with the needs of works available in Skellefteå. When we started this journey, we had an unemployment rate of 6%. It's now down to nothing. And you could say that the area in the north of Sweden is really one of the hottest areas in Sweden right now. It is where the investments are being made. So it is a big challenge for us. We have about 80 nationalities in Skellefteå now. We have the education system, for example. We have international schools, we have English schools. English is the language that we are speaking here. And the database is really trying to say what the needs are and where we can find people that have a chance to live up to that. For example, we have educations in Skåne, which is where you live, Jan. Everyone that goes through that school is kind of offered a job in Skellefteå. Wow. That's one example.
Okay, so thank you very much, Bengt, for sharing this exciting story with us, and we will come back in a panel discussion soon. I think there are great opportunities, and we are in this area, and the making of battery production in those nations. Germany, we are here, we heard about Czech and Sweden and so on. I think there's a lot of new value chain and ecosystems in the making, so it's a lot of future collaboration across border in Europe, which is wonderful. Having said that, let's go to our next and final speaker before we go into a panel. That's an example of SkillNet in Ireland. And this is a national agency for workforce learning in which the different stakeholders, including industry, corporate, incorporate closely. So Paul Healy is the CEO of SkillNet Ireland. And Paul, the floor is yours. Please share with us.
Thank you, Jan, and it is a pleasure to talk to you all today, and greeting from the city of Galway on Ireland's beautiful Wild Atlantic Way. It's a pleasure to share some information with you about our organisation and share some examples of the work that we do on behalf of government and behalf of the business community here in Ireland. So we're a government agency, as you said, Jan, and we're dedicated to boosting the innovation, the productivity and the competitiveness of the enterprise sector here in Ireland. But we do this through talent development. So why is talent so important to a country like Ireland? The reason is we are not a country that is rich in natural resources. We don't share a long industrial heritage like many of the large European countries do. We're a small country, we're a small open economy, and our greatest source of competitive strength, our greatest asset, is our people. And we create a lot of advantage and competitive advantage on the basis of our agile and highly educated workforce. So what does that look like? In the cohort of our society, of our population, age 40 years and below, we're second in Europe in terms of higher education attainment, and we rank high in global rankings in terms of workforce agility, workforce innovation, and responsiveness. However, that is an advantage, a competitive advantage that we can never give up, and it requires constant focus, constant resources, and constant policy direction to ensure our workforce remains as competitive as possible. So that'll just give you a little bit about us. I was really interested in hearing on all the speakers this afternoon, and I think there's consistency across all the speakers in terms of the key labour market and talent and skills priorities that we're all confronted with in this, the 21st year of the 21st century. And what are they? Those are about getting our people back to work on the back of the COVID-19 pandemic and bringing an end to the low-skill job. And I think the pandemic has given us an opportunity to do that, actually. The next is digitalization, and we prefer to look at this through the lens of digitalization rather than digital skills, because often digital skills is the output of the digitalization process. When a company or a small business engages on the digital journey and sees where they can bring their organization to in the context of digital transformation and what the skills and the talent implications are to achieve that. Next, of course, is green skills and how we are going to meet our country objectives in terms of climate action and the talent and the skills that are required to do that. And as we heard from so many speakers, that comes with immense opportunities in green jobs and all growth sectors in the sustainable economy, but we also have to make sure that nobody is left behind as a consequence. And lastly, particularly for smaller countries, smaller EU states like Ireland, is the role of talent in defending our open economic model. So we compete for investment like every other country does. We compete on the basis of our value proposition, of which talent is at its core. So talent, skills development, and an agile and highly educated workforce goes to the core of the Irish proposition in terms of international investment. Just to share with you and our listeners and viewers today a little bit about our organisation itself. So we are an industry-led organisation, and that is at the heart of us, that is right through our DNA. We do that by working through a group of intermediaries, and that is 73 industry associations, enterprise clusters, sectoral bodies, and chambers of commerce. And Ireland is fortunate to be well represented by its industry groups. And it is these groups acting on behalf of their clusters and acting on behalf of their members and member companies that determine for themselves the talent and the upskilling programs that are needed. These are the people that are closest to the problems, closest to the opportunities, and who are best informed to decide what type of upskilling programs are required. We then work with these organizations to make this happen on a cost-sharing basis. So it is very much industry-led. A model like that creates advantage by being driven by the people who are closest to it. So responses that are close to what the employers want, close to the labour market. It also brings a lot of agility. So we're not caught up in fixed semesters. We don't carry high capital costs. So we can respond with speed and agility to the burning enterprise and labour market issues of the day. The last aspect of a model like that is, of course, cost sharing. So we operate on broadly a 60-40 basis. Every €60 of state investment gets combined with €40 of private sector investment. That allows for a leveraging of public funding, but it also drives a lot of impact and relevance in the type of training. Why? Because companies are paying for it along with the state. So these are the advantages that a model like this brings. So we expect to support with our services 20,000 businesses this year. Those will be predominantly small firms, and we expect to support around 80,000 workers with upskilling programs. I'd like to share with you in the time I've left just two examples of our work. The first relates to what we do with the education training system, and particular higher education, in co-creating programs for the emerging technologies and the advanced technologies. So we use the fact that we have deep roots with companies and with the industry sector, but also deep roots with the higher education sector to bring those two constituents together to work on shared challenges, particularly in emerging technologies. Out of this process has come Ireland's first postgraduate programme in artificial intelligence, which is going a long way to giving Ireland a shot at a leadership position globally in artificial intelligence, because we know AI is a talent race at its fundamental. We also have developed new programs for future skills in areas of data science, in areas of blockchain, in Internet of Things, in medtech, fintech, and so on. So yet again, it's the bringing together of industry, bringing together of companies, providing a space for this ideation to happen and these requirements to be shared, and then moving into delivery on a cost-sharing basis. So it brings great competitive advantage when we approach it in that way. A second example, Jan, I'd like to share in the time that I've left is the work that we're doing in supporting our unemployed, our people who mainly have lost their jobs or have been laid off as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic in the customer-facing sector. We do not want this to become a long-term problem for our country, and we are intervening immediately. What Skill in Ireland offers is the option of what we call cross-sector employability. So helping people move from the service industry and the hospitality industry and others that have been very heavily affected by the pandemic and the restrictions to growth opportunities in sectors such as technology, the green economy, healthcare, and many others. There's three components to this scheme. The first, of course, is a career intervention where we talk to that individual to see where have they been, what is their career path, what is their experience, and so on. Next is an upskilling intervention to make them competitive for a job in a growth sector. And the final aspect is each one of these places comes with a mandatory work placement. And we have 1,200 companies in Ireland who are voluntarily supporting us hosting job seekers. And that is seeing an 80% conversion rate to employment so far. So just two examples of the strategic impact of the SkillNet model and also the agility and the speed of the impact of the SkillNet Ireland model in responding to the major policy issues and business issues of our times. With that, I'll hand you back. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's perfect in time. And thank you for a very rich presentation with a lot of facts and interesting thoughts. Let's now move into some Q&A. And we have 20 minutes together with the last four speakers to discuss. And actually, it's 5 speakers. And let's start with Martin Goebbels. Into this. And you, Martin, you mentioned the topic of learning culture. And I would ask you why it's so important and what can companies do to support the necessary cultural changes and that evolution? And also, how can a digital learning activity like yours be transferred to the SMEs? Because we think that's important. Who would need to become active and who will do what? That the two questions I have for you, and please elaborate for like 3 minutes to start with. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thanks for the questions. I try my very best to keep the 3 minutes. Let me just answer the second question at the first, maybe. So what do SMEs have to do and who has to start this? Well, from my experience, these are massive changes. And you also mentioned the cultural dimension. So the trigger could be set by HR, by the department that is typically responsible for training and for personnel development. So this could be a trigger point. But I think they need to align with the top management. This is very important. Top management has to be involved, from my experience, also at SMEs, because this involves cultural changes. And you won't be able to do so without the backing of the top management. And then you also should involve Works Council, of course, and of course, as I just mentioned, involve the associates. Don't build products that nobody needs. If you talk about digital products, products and services, you have to think digitally. Involve the users, involve your associates from the beginning, collect feedback, go fast and iterative steps, walk the talk, like Bengt said, do something. Try something. If you fail, okay, then try another thing. But this is something you'll have to do. And then you asked for the cultural dimension. Well, let me give you just one example. let's imagine we have a post-pandemic situation and we will be back in office one day. Let's imagine this. And let's imagine you sit at your desk in the office and you want to work on a video-based course, on a digital offer. So what do? You put your headphones on, you take your notepad and you start working. And you will watch these videos and maybe you take some notes. What will your colleagues think when they pass your desk? They see you with your headphones on watching some videos. What will they think? Will they think, oh, this is a nice colleague, he's very productive, supporting me and the team? Or will they think, hey, what is he doing? He's just watching videos and I have to answer all these emails. And you can just conduct this small experiment. I did this once in the office when I started, and I had to listen to some very interesting comments from my colleagues. And we also did some research in our company, and people feel uncomfortable with this situation. They feel unproductive. They feel the colleagues looking at them. They feel they have to justify what they are doing, and this prevents them from learning. So what they need is a backup from their management, from their bosses. They have to talk about this in the team, and they have to give you backup and say, hey, if you are learning, you are a productive part of the team, and we want you to learn. We want you to develop new skills. This is okay. And you have to do this on a team level and on the levels above. And this is, for example, why we start to integrate this topic in our leadership courses.
You can end 15 seconds.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. You're finished?
Okay, yeah,
okay.
I'm finished.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think those type of experience are really interesting, and that's a deep learning thing to do that. Thank you so much. Antonio Rangieri, the CDFOP Skills and Markets Intelligence Service look impressive, we can say. What do you see as the main challenges for CDFOP in offering these services and for the potential users and the ability of stakeholders to actually make use of these things? That's the question.
And now you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there is this, this joke, so to say, no? It's hard to predict, especially the future. And I mean, this could be a major challenge per se, even though, I mean, based on our experience, we are not that pessimistic in the sense that actually we see that evidence that is well structured and can give us a good prediction that is consistently more accurate than expert judgment or just intuition. So from this point of view, I mean, this is not a major challenge, the technical part. But as I said, I mean, skills intelligence is not just about crunching numbers. When we look at skills intelligence in practice, we see several bottlenecks or challenges. We have investigated the use of skills intelligence in a number of countries worldwide. And we see that quite often results are a little disseminated because partly also because are hard to disseminate, because too technical, not suitable for the need of the users. We observe frequently a lack of consultation with relevant stakeholders and potential users, which makes it difficult to understand the implications of the results of skills intelligence in practice. And very often results are considered not fit for purpose because too aggregated or because the way the skills are measured or presented. So the ambition is not only to make skills intelligence stronger, but also more actionable. And this is probably the main challenge that we have ahead.
Thank you very much. Now it's time for Johannes Pfeiffer, Laura Saxony. Based upon your experience, I will ask you about in setting up an ecosystem. What would be your recommendation to other regions interested also in moving ahead along in the lines what you described for us? And number two, what do stakeholders need to watch out for and what should they avoid to ensure everything is moving smoothly?
Yes, well, as I said before, transparency is very important because no one alone can be successful in this context. And you have to collaborate, you have to cooperate with all the partners, and so it is important to make it visible how you can work together and to reduce redundancies. There is so much activities, and often all the partners they work side to side, and there are no lines between the activities, and so you have to make visible who is working on what issues and how you can work together. And that is, I think, the most important first step. And then you have to define a goal where you want to go. Transformation is such a big issue, and you often it's very abstract, and you can't handle that issue. And so you have to make sure what are the goals and where do you want to go. And when this is clear between all the partners, then you can go in concrete steps, and you can go and develop concrete activities. And I think that is very important for other regions.
Thank you very much. That's very good to hear your comment linked to that question. Let me now move to Bengt Ivansson. And I would say when I first heard about this, I thought it was impossible. But now I understand it's not. So how can something like what you describe be transferred or be an inspiration to other cities and regions around Europe? Let me start with that question. Please go ahead, Bengt. 2 minutes to start with.
What I think, first of all, is that you need a leadership at the council of a city that is brave and consistent and really built on trust. Politicians are elected in Sweden four years in a row, and they are really careful about pleasing everyone. You need to be brave enough to say that we have a strategy. When I came to the office, they had said we are going to increase. We're going to grow with 8,000 people in 15 years. And to me, that was a miracle that the politicians had set a goal that was measurable in time and volume. I think everything starts from the top and it flows down. So that's really so important, because if you, as I was working for the mayor, and I could not, of course, do anything else than what he wanted me to do, so to speak. And so I think the first of all is that you need a strong political leadership that are in agreement between the parties. We actually spent a year convincing the society of what we were trying to do. Lots of dialogues with the city. And you could wake up anyone in Skellefteå and ask them, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to be 15,000. We're going to be 8,000 people more in 15 years. So we started a program called Skellefteå 2030. So I think leadership from the top is so important, because there's a lot of consequences, especially with money and budgeting, when you start to do a thing like this, because it's kind of expensive to do. So
would I interpret you correct to say that you need a unity and a collaboration platform for the politicians and together with the citizens, so we know where we are embarking? That's what you say.
Absolutely. Yeah. You need to involve. We had discussions with the companies, with the different organizations, sport clubs, construction companies. We talked with people for about a year. Lots of meetings, and at the end I felt kind of tired of doing it, but it was a really important thing we did. We called it a branding program of our city. So everyone was dreaming kind of the same dream for our city, which was actually interesting. When we talked with the leadership of Northvolt, they said that we feel that this city is so cohesive. It is so singing the same song. Everyone we talk to wants the same thing, and that was really worthwhile of doing that process before we really started to be very offensive, so to speak.
Yeah. So let me also ask you, now when we hear this amazing process and you were able to get this factory for Northvolt with that huge competition from very many different cities, and all of them having kind of a green energy, when we think about this future, it looks to me that you have to think maybe outside the box or without the box even more when it comes to the skills issue, when you're going into the delivery mood, because this is a huge thing of reskilling, upskilling in the whole of Europe. And you said you had this background and now these people are coming. So would you say that the whole ecosystem up there, is it enough connected to the rest of Europe, going for the different smart funding in the EU and so on and so forth, and really, you know, pressing on to get the best opportunities and finances in place for which is to come with all these new workers, honestly?
I would say that we have for many years. I mean, I am from Stockholm, but we have lived up in the north for 38 years now, and I would say that lots of attention and actually funding goes to the big cities in a country like Sweden. We have been really, I would say, been suffering from the fact that we did not get the money before. But now when this happened, we have gotten a lot of attention from this, of course, the Swedish government, but also from EU. There's been battery programs, battery educations, lots of attentions from EU, actually fundings, and so I would say that with this happening, we've been put on the map, so to speak. We have actually, there is a person appointed from the government who is now with the only one task is to make sure that everything is going well for the northern part of Sweden. He's working for the government in all those questions of getting attention. We've been dealing with the train and a new train coming to the north, which is now happening. New roads, which is now happening. University programs, which is not happening. So it is, of course, helping with a big investment like this. Yeah.
So let's wish you best luck together with the city to really go forth and to move on and to create value for all of those who are now in battery production all over Europe. Thank you so much.
Just say can I just say one more interesting thing?
10 seconds.
We're producing copper in Skellefteå. Every night there's a copper train going to Germany, and for the car industry. And the fact is that if our copper smelter is not working, the German car industry has to stop within a week. So I mean, Europe is really combined together. Yeah. And so we better work together, because if we don't, we're going to screw up.
So let me then say collaboration, Germany, Sweden, and the rest of all the nations in Europe is essential. Okay.
Dankeschön.
Dankeschön. Bitte. Paul Haley, this looks like a very powerful created workforce learning initiative that you shared with us. And the question is, have the traditional education and training providers managed to adapt to the new requirements for a more in-demanding training, or has their role been taken over by others? That's number first. Second, what would you like to recommend to stakeholders in other countries to successfully set up similar activities as you have been doing in your if they set up the same type of activities in their countries? The floor is yours.
Okay, look, just to take your first question, we don't contradict or conflict with the public education system, with the higher education system. We actually complement it, and let me explain why. Because in many ways, what the public and higher education system do is supply-driven, program-orientated, and so on. What we do is demand-driven. Okay, so it is from the coalface, controlled directly with employers, and that complements what the state is doing. So it is a complementary rather than a conflicting method. However, we have found that by working together, particularly with higher education, but across the wider training and education ecosystem, we can bring the educational institutes, higher education in particular, closer to the needs of enterprise, closer to what companies actually need. And we're often the mediator or the curator in that conversation. So we would argue that we have helped in terms of developing programs for future skills, for cutting edge technologies, in collaboration with the university sector, that could have been very difficult for them to achieve without an agency like ours that can bring so many employers to the table. I think that's how I would address the first question. So it's very much complementary rather than conflicting. So a system like SkillNet Ireland that's enterprise-led, working alongside a government-led further and higher education and public education system. So that's the first question. Just turning to the second question around how I would advise anyone who, or any nation state, member state that's interested in looking at a model like ours. So at the heart of this is partnership. So the first question that would need to be asked, are there enough willing partners, industry bodies, trade associations, chambers of commerce, that are willing to step up and give the talent agenda leadership on behalf of their members? So that's the burning question, because we don't deliver a single program or a single course. That's entirely delivered through our partners, and we act very much as a curator and a mediator to that extent. So we're fortunate in our country here in Ireland that we're well served by, well-organised industry groups, chambers of commerce, sectoral representative bodies, etc. And we leverage those relationships that they have with their companies, and in many ways we piggyback on them, and that's how we channel our services. So we have a ready-made access to thousands of companies every year simply by leveraging the membership of the 73 industry groups that we work with. So that's the first question. So are there partners available, and is there a willingness amongst those partners to give the talent agenda leadership? The second question then relates to the policy focus of the state. So is the state willing to do something innovative and different in terms of putting the control into the hands of companies, and willing to co-invest with those companies on the talent agenda? So if a nation state or if a government isn't happy with either of those two dimensions, the willingness and the availability and readiness of partnerships, and the willingness of government to take that risk and to take that leap of faith to say that we will put the control of this process into the hands of companies. So those are the two big things I would suggest that countries do who are considering a model like ours.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. And I would now like to thank all good practice speakers for sharing their great experience and input with us as a real help into all our future challenges, which we have and will have. So thank you so much. Let me now come to the poll and make some conclusions of the polls and what has been said now when you have been we have asked you questions and you have told us what it is. It's time to see the results. They are very interesting, and now you see them here. And it looks like we have at least the right alternatives. It seems like yesterday that these are very important. We see that and there are good balance. The skills mismatch and limited career, the lack of resources for continuous learning to remain competent for new on-demand roles, opportunities for upskilling in the last technologies like AI to drive and the changing demands, to search for tasks, the third one, contract negotiation, time management, capabilities to fix own schedules and work from home, and final one, lack of bargaining power in social protection. So we see it's very, very relevant. That's the first one. Second one. Which would be the main barriers preventing SMEs, freelancers from using effectively online business platforms? Yeah, lack of knowledge and awareness, and lack of necessary technical expertise and necessary digital skills. That's the number. That's the highest. And do not see any clear benefits and return on investment. That's the lowest. So most people see as a return, see a clear benefit here. And then we have the SMEs awaiting new non-predatory platforms to appear in the market and better governance regulations. It's not so important as the two first one, but still it's quite important, I would say. So that was the second question. The third question is, what is your opinion about the skills development for platform workers and the role of government regarding digital online platforms. And what is the most important here is fund programs for SMEs and experts to provide target support services. And second is the yellow one on the bottom, develop stronger and better regulations of platform organized markets. And number 3 is the top, the blue one, provide opportunities for up and reskilling at higher education and VET level, vocational education training level. And then the lowest, in the second from the top, fund operation of business innovation, centers, hubs, and clusters. That's what have been said. And let me conclude that these are important questions. We can go back to the first one. No, we can't. So let's take it from there. And I would say they are important, all of them. And that's where we stand. Thank you so much for your responses into this. It's very appreciated and highly appreciated. And I would say that we now, you might be very interested in what is come next. And firstly, I would say, as you will have recognized, we are currently using the Skills4Industry YouTube channel for streaming the event. So later this week, the recorded streams of both conference days will be made available on this channel. On this channel, you will also find a range of more than 20 short 2 to 3 minute videos, statements, and messages from a range of experts around the globe from all over Europe and the rest of the world. Several of these are already available now, and they're shown prior to both conferences days. More will follow and become available to make this channel a rich resource of information. I think very rich. And secondly, what is happening is after this event, you can download the slides which have been and will be presented today and tomorrow from the documents section on the Skills4Industry website. So please note, you can get all these wonderful slides and presentations you have got and you've been looking into, trying to take notes. And you're also encouraged to send general comments and suggestions relating to the scenarios and recommendations, action and visions before the end of July at the latest. This will then be fed into the finalization in this process. So the plan is to further develop the report, considering all expert inputs, and finish it by the 31st of August 2021, and to make it publicly available in September 2021. Again, have your say and send us your contribution. Let me also finally here say I would like to thank all speakers, panelists, and participants, and the European Commission for having organized this event. It's been a great pleasure for me to be here together with you. And let me also close the day with a kind of a call for action. And that is a call by all stakeholders to act as CSO, Chief Skills Officers, and take ownership and responsibility for bold and coordinated actions, well-financed, linked to the EU Commission multi-annual financial framework from now 2021 up to 2027. This is so we together can realize all this great ambitious vision and goals and actions being set for the European skills agenda, the industrial strategy, and the Europe Digital Decade Compass. So let's hope that this inspiring conference will create great impact regarding a better up and reskilled European workforce and be a new cornerstone on Europe's path towards service innovation and new jobs. I think that's the case. And thank you so much for all you've been taking part of in this, for your participation. And I would say we wish you all future success, skillful success in the area of innovation linked to up and reskilling from now on. This to make Europe more competitive and very, very skillful, ready for the future. If you wish, you can look at the 1-minute video right after this. We're ending the conference including to you the European Commission Digital Skills and Jobs Platform, who explains what that's all about. So let me, with these words, say thank you so much, thank you again, and goodbye. Have a great summer, and go for reskilling, upskilling, even when you have holiday, because you can do that in a very nice way. Receiving new impressions, resting, have a great time. Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Digital transformation impacts how we live, work, and learn. Technologies can help us to recover from the pandemic, but we need digital talent to make the most of them. If you agree, visit the Digital Skills and Jobs platform, the home of European initiatives on digital skills and jobs. Together with the Digital Europe programme and the Digital Skills and Jobs Coalition, the platform fosters European expertise in advanced digital technologies. It will help you to digitally upskill yourself, your employees, students, or people in your community. The platform offers training and funding opportunities, national and EU actions, good practices and resources, data and insights, an active community, news and events, and much more. To put it simply, the platform helps you find what you need and connects you with whom you need. Join the community and contribute to building the home of digital skills in Europe.